So, hello everyone. I know some of you have been wanting the Inhumans video quite a lot, so we're finally doing it. I don't know much about the Inhumans other than they have a moon base and that they're another offspring of humanity similar to the mutants and that they were created by not an eternal but a celestial, if I'm correct. If I'm remembering things correctly. So, yeah. Well, how should I put this other than... Yeah, we're finally doing this video. I don't know what is the big difference between the Inhumans and mutants due to the fact that they are both sort of mutations that can be called upon or dormant within a human that can basically show themselves out to be. Other than that, I'm not really sure what's going on about this. I know about a few Inhumans that I've mentioned before, such as Black Bolt, Medusa, that one teleporting giant bulldog. I do remember the Inhumans as, because in Marvel Ultimate Alliance, you get to, basically go around their base a little. You can't speak to Black Bolt, obviously, and Medusa kind of just translate for it, basically speaks for him, because he can't really do much. I was still kind of crazy that Inhumans had at least, like, one issue of Marvel, 2099. Mutants and Inhumans don't really get talked about much, but they kind of just got destroyed, so I guess it's just do whatever you want. Kind of feel bad for them. But Inhumans usually don't get a lot until, well, you know, the whole talk we had earlier about Inhumans getting a gigantic push out of nowhere, which I still feel is a little crazy. It's definitely interesting at the very least, but yeah. So, I'm not sure what exactly will be going on. Marvel's biggest failure is a hell of a thing to say, though. Because Marvel has had quite a few big failures, funny enough. At least in terms of, like, either comic books or, well, there's some animated shows that didn't do so well that they kind of push for. And some other things that obviously, yeah, as a company that has existed for like 80 years, there have been a bunch of failures, been a bunch of ups and downs for them. But I will say this, I do like quite a few heroes on here, so, we're probably gonna run into a bunch of Inhumans or only Inhumans because they can't be mutants. At least, that's what I think is gonna happen. I don't know if it's exactly going to be what's gonna happen, but I feel like we're gonna be like, oh yeah, they're Inhuman this one time. So, yeah. It's, this might be something where we're getting Kid Kaiju and Moon Girl, which I thought Moon Girl's, like, Inhuman ability was going to be her intelligence, like, that's what it was, but instead it's a one-off random ability that has no real bearing on her, only real, well, kind of still does have a bearing on her, but, you know, I learned about a bunch of weird Inhumans during, like, the, Secret War stuff, like, you see shorts about him, like that one dude who can vomit up anything someone else needs, which is a extremely gross power that I would not want to have, because, you know, don't get me wrong, I love helping people, but I feel like that would be even too much, even for me, to just throw up stuff. I don't remember what his name is. It's like Upchuck or something. No, wait, that's from Ben 10. I wonder if Sir Superhero will ever do a Ben 10 video. I mean, I love some of the aliens from Ben 10. Oh, yeah, and there apparently is going to be a Ben 10 TTRPG. I don't know if any of you know that, but, you know, I thought it was something that I should bring up at the very least, because I thought it might be fun for you guys to know. But anyway, on that, we should probably get into the video until I stop, for me to stop yapping just a bit.
The Avengers, Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Fantastic
Four, a lot of teams,
and many others. Marvel
so many.
has a lot of characters, with the total
Sometimes
amount
they bought
reaching
some.
over 80,000 over the company's
really?
decades of history.
Goddamn, that's not
of course,
that surprising.
Nowhere near all of them are in the spotlight
Ultra
at any given
Force.
time. Even among the roster of main characters, the level of popularity that different people have changes constantly.
Oh yeah.
Movies, general fan culture,
Like,
even one
X-Men was one of the
notably
biggest
good
things
or
originally.
bad comic can entirely change the hierarchy of who's doing the best in the Marvel
Yeah.
universe. This is normal, and whenever something shifts, it will inevitably shift again pretty soon.
Yeah.
What you rarely see is a shakeup that sticks.
Yeah, that shakeups usually don't stick. They usually try to go back to norms no matter what. And teams, like, originally the X-Men was one of the biggest teams out there. I think that's mostly due to the comic, but yeah. And then there's a bunch of other ones that try to do stuff, you know. I'm trying to think of a few. We then got the Avengers do that whole movie saga with all the different heroes. Iron Man has gotten the biggest push ever. Like, he got that own little animated series. We had, like, the Hulk is always big, I feel like. Everyone likes the Hulk hands. You remember having Hulk hands, don't you? Hulk smash. Anyway.
A shakeup so disastrous that Marvel took an entire group of characters with 60 years of history and killed them off entirely.
What?
And I don't mean comic book killed, where characters die and then miraculously
Wait,
return a couple
they're
of issues
dead?
later. No. When Marvel got rid of the Inhumans,
They
stayed
got
gone
rid of them.
for years. The tale of the Inhumans is a wild
thought-
one.
weren't they made by
beginning
Jack
all the
Kirby?
way back in the 1960s and quickly deteriorating as it reaches the modern day. It is a
God
story full
damn.
of questionable writing, more questionable business choices, and enough real-world drama that the CEO of Marvel Entertainment had to get his lawyer to issue a public statement responding to the chaos.
Oh.
I know it's a bold claim to make,
Death of
but
the
I really do
Inhumans.
think that this debacle earns the title of
Sometimes-
this video
yeah.
as Marvel's biggest failure. It's also the longest video I've made to date, so needless to say, we have a lot
the
of ground
Inhumans
to
don't get
cover.
much.
Without further ado, let's talk about the rise and fall of the Inhumans. The question that I always have to answer first whenever I'm doing one of these 2-hour deep dives is
Alright.
what order do I present the information
Probably
in?
chronologically.
Do I talk about the history of the characters as it stands in
Inhumans
universe and in Marvel
Prime,
canon,
what?
or do I present it in real-world time based on when everything was written and published? The history of the
I do think it's kind of funny that they kind of got Kamala Khan to basically quickly switch to like, no, she died as an Inhuman, but now she's an X-Man. I'm like, what? You could have just, I don't know, you didn't need to do it that far, but okay. I just found that extremely funny. They're so desperate to, like, make some characters not be involved or be an Inhuman anymore that they just kill them off and have them resurrect. Which, yeah. I think that's goofy in the long run.
Inhumans is so unique that to properly analyze it, I'm going to have to use both of those methods over the course of this one video. But I think the best starting point is with their first appearances, setting you up to really understand how much the characters have changed. So that's where we'll begin. The year is 1964, and Marvel is doing great. Many of their most popular characters were created around this time, and the Fantastic Four in particular are comic book royalty.
Yeah,
As
they
normal
really
as it
are
might seem today,
at this point.
The Fantastic
The first
Four was
family
the
of
first
Marvel
comic to introduce the idea of a superhero team also being a regular family, which caught on really fast.
Well, I mean,
Because
they're
of its
Marvel's
success,
first family,
It only
so
makes sense
it
that
makes
Marvel
sense.
would give the FF other super families to interact with.
Yeah.
And this was the first job of the Inhumans.
Really?
Though, despite what I literally just said, they would not get introduced as a family immediately. The first appearance of a single
Attack of the Evil
Inhuman
FF,
was
the
in
Frightening
Fantastic
Four.
Four issue 36.
Frightening
and
Four?
This is where our story begins.
The Frightening Four. Literally just, okay, I guess the Inhumans got twisted up with that because I see Medusa. This looks like Sandman. Who the hell is this? Wow. So we really are doing the thing of fighting evil versions, or, backward versions where we're just having opposites. I mean, they've done that before with other characters, and it sometimes works out. Sometimes it doesn't go so well, because the Frightening Four doesn't sound like a bad name for a supervillain team, but what the hell am I looking at with this colors of purple?
This book sees the formation of a new villain team called the Frightful Four.
The Frightful
made up
Four,
of
I
just
said it
3
wrong.
people at the start: the Wizard, Sandman, and Paste Pot Pete.
Pacepot
the
Pete
wizard
is here.
the leader, and from
And
the
the
team's
wizard.
name alone, it should
And
be very
Sandman.
obvious that this group is intended as his dark mirror to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Not in the
Pacepot
sense that, like,
Pete.
their powers are parallels or anything like that, but
No.
in the sense that the teams are each made up of 3 boys and 1 girl. That's not me making a joke
really?
either. Wizard
That's
is
it?
weirdly insistent
That's
in the
it?
comic that the team have a, quote, suitable female, his words not
What?
mine, to such a level that he delays the team's villainy for weeks to find one.
What?
The suitable female that he finds is a woman named Medusa, who has the ability to control her hair, using it as tools or weapons.
It honestly
Medusa
doesn't seem that
has
useful unless the
apparently
hair
heard
is
of
real
the
strong.
wizard and is happy to have him lead her. Look, this is
What?
going to be very 1960s for another couple of minutes here. I promise it's going to get better. Just bear with me.
Okay.
Medusa's backstory is not yet revealed.
These
She's
outfits.
just mysterious, but with her addition, the Frightful Four is complete and become recurring
I still can't believe they got
villains.
Pacepot
Skipping forward a
Pete.
bit, the next issue that matters for
The
our
Trapster.
purposes is issue 44, which starts giving us some details about her origins. Despite the fact that she's fought the Fantastic Four a couple times already, Medusa
Oh,
goes to
really?
the heroes for help this time, mentioning only that she needs to escape the city before she is caught by somebody named Gorgon.
Gorgon.
Gorgon is huge and clearly has some superpowers of his own, taking the form of strong goat-like legs, which let him kick through stuff or stomp to create
Okay.
earthquakes. He's
Weird.
very destructive. An
Madam
entire building
Medusa.
gets demolished during this fight, which is a big plot point later, but he's only there for Medusa. Midway through the chaos, Gorgon gives us the first information as to what's actually going on, claiming
Alright.
that both he and Medusa have their superpowers because they belong to the same race, and he has been sent to bring her back to that race as she is forbidden to mingle with others. This is not something that the FF is just going to let happen,
course.
so the fighting continues, but unfortunately for Medusa, there was
Oh.
another villain in this issue, and when
Called-
that guy distracts the heroes, Gorgon sneaks away with her.
Oh, great.
That is the cliffhanger ending of issue 44.
What the hell
but
is
in
that?
issue 45, the Fantastic Four actually don't go after Medusa immediately. It is
Oh.
stated that they would at some point, but they have other priorities, and at the end of the day, Medusa getting captured by Gorgon was one of their enemies getting captured by another one of their enemies, so not high on the list of things to deal with.
I guess.
As read into invest.
I mean, that's, I guess that's a finer purpose. But what was that thing earlier? Was that just a gargoyle? Was that a monster gargoyle? Because that's what it looked like. Ugh, my throat's getting very dry. I'm sorry, in order to do these really long videos, I have to turn off my AC. So if I cough a little, it gets really hot here. So, doing this long videos for like more than 2 hours without AC in this kind of heat is going to slowly melt me away, so we're gonna have to do my best. But I've always feel like I need to put my thoughts in, at least on this, which I still think it's a bit insane that they would do it. At the end of all We're Quiets, by Johnny's thoughts skipping from one thing to another as a teenage will until, say, I couldn't call or Evans for days. I wonder how she's doing. Okay, so he just has his priorities straight, I guess. But yeah, I have to do this in the heat. We'll go through with this, but yeah.
Investigate the origins of the other monster from the previous issue, Johnny leaves and looks for ways to entertain himself. He's a bit annoyed at the time because,
He was
well,
gonna
to
go on a
update
date.
this 60s comic into modern slang, his situationship is ghosting him, so he goes on a walk to clear his head.
Okay.
In his aimless wandering, Johnny ends up near the building that was destroyed earlier that day, and in the wreckage, he sees a woman. A woman who is apparently so beautiful that Johnny says, quote, I hate to be disloyal, but she makes the girl I've been talking to seem like a boy.
Well,
I told you, this is a good comic, and it was genuinely progressive for the time. But boy, is it very 60s. He crosses
yeah.
the street to try and
I guess
talk
so.
to her, which causes the woman to immediately scream and run away. Not an
Oh.
entirely unreasonable response, given that she was being approached by a strange man in the middle of the night. But the thing that makes it weird is that as she runs,
Hmm?
a small tornado appears with enough force to knock
Oh.
Johnny off of his feet.
Okay.
Cut to the next day, and Johnny is still thinking about this because he's a teenage boy who saw a mysterious, beautiful woman with wind powers. I don't think I need to explain his intrigue
you
any
don't.
further.
You don't.
Hoping that he might see the girl again and also figure out what the deal is with her,
What
he
the
goes
dealio?
back to the rubble, and indeed, there she is a second time. Much like the time before, Johnny's presence causes her to scream and run away, but instead of using wind to cover her tracks, she conjures a burst of fire.
That means nothing
this,
to
of course,
him.
does nothing to stop the Human Torch. He just flames on and walks right through it. And unexpectedly, her apparent pursuer bursting into flames actually calms the woman down. Importantly, this is not because she recognizes Johnny,
but because he also has
Remember,
powers.
The Fantastic Four are public celebrities, and also Johnny is literally wearing his costume in this scene. But no, the woman who introduces herself as Crystal has no idea who he is, which makes the whole thing even weirder.
Yeah.
The reason that the fire calmed her down was just
must
that
be one
Johnny
of us.
had
Why didn't you say
superpowers
so?
at all, which caused Crystal to mistakenly assume that he was, quote,
one of them.
us.
One
Johnny
of
does not
us.
know what one of us means in this scenario, but at this point he's kind of getting freaked out and decides that he should just play along until he can figure out what the hell is going on.
Yeah.
Crystal then introduces Johnny to her giant dog with antenna and also certified good boy Lockjaw.
Lockjaw,
and then maybe
that was
jumping
his
the
name.
gun a little bit, leads him to a secret underground facility that was lurking underneath this building the whole time so that he can meet the rest of her family.
Oh.
I'm going to skim over the members of the family for now, only because this group is like
got
the main
Black
cast for
Bolt. I
the
forgot
Inhumans,
his name was
and therefore
Lockjaw.
we'll get an entire section later in this video explaining each of them in detail.
Alrighty.
But they consist of Karnak, Triton, Black Bolt, and most importantly for this plotline, Gorgon and Medusa.
Yeah.
Medusa immediately recognizes Johnny as not part of whatever group this is, and realizing that the jig is up, he bursts out of the ceiling of their base and goes to warn the Fantastic Four about this weird group of superhumans, which has apparently been under New York City for some amount of time.
You're like the weird mutants from Futurama in that case. I did not know that they just lived underground like the Murlocs for a bit here, which is, I'm not gonna lie, more than a bit surprising. I was not expecting this. It's just, we live underground. I thought they were actually gonna go to a moon base or something. That was my honest thought here. Okay, we're doing this. Alright. I'm not gonna lie, I'm more than a bit confused. I'm gonna read a little bit of this. Johnny, how do you know my sister? I do not understand. No time to explain now, Crystal, so you're a part of the superpowered race, Medusa. Flee, Torch, do not remain here if you value your life. Crystal was deceived, he is not one of us. Wait, wouldn't the Inhumans know that they were one? Maybe not. It's still interesting, because I thought they would have the moon base thing at this point. Also, Lockjaw was the first one they meet, which is, I can't remember Lockjaw's powers. I think he could teleport, but, or maybe it was telepathy. I can't speak today, or the heat is just slowly melting me. It could be one of the two, But yeah, this panel is actually pretty cool looking. I will say, old art wasn't bad. It's just different. And they're still learning a few things. So yeah, this is a whole nother thing going on. Just seeing this happen, which is, yeah, a hell of a thing for the Human Torch. Just run into a bunch of crazy people just living underground. Which, yeah, I feel like the mutant parallels kind of work here with the Murlocs. Or was it the Morlocks? Murlocs or Morlocks, guys? You guys tell me, because I remember the group of mutant people living underground. I know that, I forget her name, the girl that can control her bones decided to join them at some point. Whatever happened to the Murlocs? Or the Morlocks? You guys can tell me down below.
The other family pursues him, and the two
Those
teams
who
get
destroy
into
us.
a big fight, which
Makes
ends
sense.
with the mysterious underground dwellers retreating. But as they do, they mention something about hiding from a
Okay,
guy
we must
named the Seeker,
The
and
Seeker.
concerned by all of the wild stuff that has happened in the last day and a half, the Fantastic Four keeps investigating.
Makes sense?
Reed is able to track him down, and this is the dude who will
thought he was
finally
an
give
Inhuman.
us the lore.
All
The
right.
Seeker has no apparent beef with the FF, at least not yet, as in his own words, his mission is to return escaped Inhumans to somewhere called the Great Refuge.
Probably
to which
on the
Four
moon.
respond, who are the Inhumans? Now, with the information that we already know, which is that at least some of the Inhumans were hiding underground and not allowed to interact with the outside world, and there's apparently a guy whose entire job is hunting them down if they escape.
That's not
It is
good.
really clear that the existence of the Inhumans was a grand secret, not to be shared with the public.
Yeah.
The Seeker then immediately
do you
tells
think
the
humans
Fantastic
are only
Four all the
intelligent life
details
will
because Anyway, way back in prehistoric times, there was another intelligent civilization evolving alongside humanity. They were similar to humans in many ways, but advanced at a much faster rate, getting to basically sci-fi levels while cavemen were still hitting each other with clubs. The specialty of this civilization was genetics. They gained near total control over their biology and could manipulate it in any way they wished, giving every member of them superpowers and starting to refer to themselves as the Inhumans.
This is very different.
Stopping the Inhumans from global dominance was that they were a relatively small group. There were a lot more humans, and they reproduced way quicker. Plus, humanity had a tendency to fear the Inhumans, seeing them as monsters or demons.
Makes sense.
When the two species inevitably clashed, humanity won out based on sheer numbers, and the Inhumans were driven into secret civilizations. Amazingly, despite being in a comic from the 1960s, this origin is still true.
Really?
A lot more context has been added over the decades, which of course we will be going over shortly, but this page has not been retconned to hell and back, and at a foundational level is a good summary of the Inhuman history.
I honestly thought that it would have been retconned to hell and back, because of the stuff I know about Inhumans. Because, well, as we've gone through it, it's, you know, it's stuff in humanity, so I thought since they're a different race, obviously, they wouldn't be connected to humanity in that way. They are just a different offsplit that's highly intelligent then. But it also kind of makes things confusing, because if they have complete control of their genetics, then what the hell is doing with the modern Inhumans, or the less than modern ones, considering the Terrigen Wave, and, you know, if they had complete control of their genetics and could give themselves superpowers, then how are certain people losing control of their abilities and not being able to, you know, do all the crazy stuff that normal Inhumans can do? That's... okay. Apparently there's going to be a lot explained to me here.
It also makes a lot of things add up about this original story. The small group of Inhumans living under New York City were not supposed to be there. They were fugitives, and the fight with the Fantastic Four had led the Seeker to their location so that he could bring them back to the Great Refuge that had existed since prehistory. As for Medusa's part, she was separated with them because she crashed a flying vehicle in an unrelated fight, leading to her being an amnesiac on a random island for a while. As you can probably guess, that explanation was written in a couple years later.
Yeah,
Reed is amazed at the idea of a secret superhuman society that has been right under his nose for his entire life and beyond, and immediately asks where this great refuge is.
Of
at
course.
which point the Seeker, I guess, decides that he has revealed enough ancient secrets for one day and refuses to tell them. After one more fight, the Inhumans actually...
my correction, only Triton gets caught, taken, the others pursue him, same difference, they all go to the refuge. Alright. Fine to me.
They do end up going with the Seeker, but the combination of Reed's own interest and the fact that the group is clearly being taken against their will means that the Four's involvement is not yet over.
Of course
Reed
not.
sneaks a tracker onto the Seeker's ship, and the scene immediately cuts to the Great Refuge, where we get another lore drop. It turns out that the reason this particular family of Inhumans was not at the Great Refuge with the others was that they had been exiled by the Inhuman King, a man named Maximus. Upon learning that the family is back, Maximus is outraged. Which, I mean, if that seems like an inconsistency, yeah, earlier in this same issue, the Seeker says he's been ordered to retrieve them by Maximus, and then Maximus is angry when they come back because he had his own plans and didn't actually want them there. I don't know what's up with that. Maximus is canonically insane, so maybe the lore explanation for this is just he's crazy, but it's probably just bad writing.
It could just be crazy.
The reason that Maximus is unhappy about the Inhumans' return is that he's not the rightful king of the Great Refuge.
It's Black Bolt.
The actual king is Black Bolt, leader of this Inhuman family, and Maximus's brother. Now, Black Bolt has not spoken a word throughout this entire arc.
Well, you'll never let your endanger
mute, and this page gives us an explanation as to why. Apparently, Maximus was the one who removed Black Bolt's speech, framing it as an accident, and then using this as an excuse to steal the throne. For anyone who knows anything about Black Bolt already, this would get very retconned later. For those of you who don't, I will address it in the Royal Family character section.
I mean, it sounds about right. We all know the reason why Black Bolt doesn't speak nowadays.
Maximus is terrified that with the family, who we now know to be the Inhuman royal family,
The
back in
royal
refuge,
family.
he's going to lose his power. And this fear is incredibly justified, as Black Bolt immediately just kind of knocks Maximus over, grabs the crown off of his head, and puts it on. At which point Maximus, who knows he cannot beat Black Bolt in an outright battle, gives up and moves to Plan B.
Wait, what?
Shortly after the rightful king is restored, which was apparently as easy as that, the Fantastic Four arrive in the Great Refuge as well, just in time for the last couple pages of the comic. If the pacing of this seems really weird, yeah, I promise that's not just the way I'm presenting it. This comic is very strange. Johnny reunites with Crystal, but reunions between the rest of the groups are far more icy. Despite being a lot better than the scheming Maximus, King Black Bolt and Queen Medusa are very wary of humanity. So Reed and Sue try to convince them to rejoin humanity and find their place in the world, the kind of thing that you would expect from the Fantastic Four.
Yeah,
and
they try to come to terms with people.
Of the issue, we see that as this discussion is going on, Maximus has run away to that Plan B I mentioned, which is a device called the Atmo Gun that, with a click of a button, will exterminate all of humanity immediately.
What?
Because comic book mad scientist supervillain.
Okay.
Like I just said, this is right at the end of the comic. Literally, the final two panels are Maximus pulling the trigger on the Atmo gun, and then a dramatic shot of the Earth
pulls
about
the trigger.
to explode or something. I don't know. The arc is really heating up as we go into issue 48, which is called Fantastic Four: The Coming of Galactus.
The Coming of Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Issue 48 of the Fantastic Four is both the end of the first Inhumans arc and the
start of Galactus?
Of the first Galactus arc. Which
confusing!
Is wild, but this was kind of just the way that comics were written during this era. The pacing is just one thing after another with basically no breaks in between whatsoever.
Not even a break to think or breathe.
But we are going to be covering the first few pages of this issue. This won't take long either. There's another very quick fight. Black Bolt and Maximus have a brawl ending in a very brutal slap. This is a pretty hilarious panel, actually. And then the Atmo gun does go off. It just doesn't work. The machine was only going to kill humans exclusively because Maximus had programmed it to. He had designed it so that it would leave Inhumans unharmed. But then apparently the two species were close enough to each other that the machine could not recognize the separation and then didn't kill anybody, revealing that humans and Inhumans were never so different after all. It's a bit of a cheesy moral, but it works, and it is the thing that makes the Inhuman royal family consider opening themselves up.
I mean, it's the same sort of moral that we got from Master Mold, which is why he was taking over the planet, because, as he put it, he was supposed to defend humans from mutants. He's like, mutants are humans, even though a computer would believe such a thing, basically, is the implication. Which, yeah, I mean, that's understandable. If humans and mutants are so close to each other, then it makes sense that they would basically... Even on a DNA level, that a supercomputer would be able to see that and just say that it needs to protect humans from humans. Which, I mean, it's the same sort of moral here, just with a giant gun. So, I guess it still works. Yeah. That's just my thoughts on it, at the very least. You don't have to take everything as my word of value here, so, yeah.
Maximus will not accept this, though. He believes that Inhumans are fully superior, and in an excellent display of 1960s comic book science, reverses the polarity on the Atmo gun, which switches the function from mass murder to creating a force field around the Great Refuge. What does that mean? The Atmo gun works as intended, sealing the Inhuman city away not by choice, but simply by trapping it inside the dome. The Fantastic Four barely managed to make it out, separating Johnny and Crystal in the process, which causes both of them to have a full-on mental breakdown on their respective sides of the force field. Let me remind you, they met at most 36 hours ago.
Yeah, they did not meet that long ago.
The arc ends with the Fantastic Four solemnly walking away from the refuge in a bittersweet victory. On one hand, the Inhumans have been freed from the tyranny of Maximus,
on the other hand,
they are now locked away, possibly forever. And then the next panel, not even the next page, literally immediately after this, is the first appearance ever of the Silver
Surfer.
So yeah, the arc is like over right then.
Wow.
This does not mean that the Inhumans were entirely abandoned, however. Actually, quite the opposite. Apparently, the characters were popular enough that they immediately became a recurring B-plot in the Fantastic Four series.
They became a
For a while after this, the Inhuman royal family would get a page or two in every couple of issues, telling the story of their attempts to break out of the dome and eventual success, culminating, of course, in Johnny reuniting with Crystal. This is also the point where I can end the issue-to-issue play-by-play of the first Inhumans storyline, because from this point on, they were part of the larger Marvel Universe. Most of their appearances were in Fantastic Four for a while, but you could see them crossing over with other characters, and they even got their own self-titled series in 1970,
and the Black Widow.
though it was a 2-in-1 comic that they had to share with Black Widow.
Interesting,
this is the rough status quo that the Inhumans had for a couple of decades. They were never major parts of the Marvel Universe, but they were there decently often, and as best I can tell, were pretty well received. The most accurate way that I can describe the group is like the Fantastic Four's quirky cousins.
I guess that works.
No, Johnny's dating one of them. Maybe not cousins.
Yeah, maybe we're not in Alabama here.
Earlier in this video, the Fantastic Four were the undisputed kings of the industry in this early era. So being FF side characters was actually a pretty good status quo to have.
It's a pretty good gig.
Like the Inhumans, they had something of a cult following, and so
we're seeing King Size Special, The Inhumans Untold Saga, which, I mean, I feel like the Inhumans at this point show that some characters are best used sparingly and not overall too much. Because otherwise, I mean, they have a whole royal family thing that I feel like it's okay, it's a little weird, but it's alright. So, yeah. It's, yeah, they're okay, I think, sparingly at the very least.
Would expand gradually over the coming years. This makes for a great transition to the next part of the video. What is the in-universe history of these characters?
Okay,
Inhumans lore has basically been drip-fed to us over an extremely long time.
It's comics, I expected
quite a lot of drips.
Oh my god, 136... Okay.
Origin that the Seeker told the Fantastic Four right in their first appearance is still true, as I mentioned, but there's been a whole bunch of things tacked onto the front and back of it. If I presented the history of the Inhumans to you as it had been written in real-world time, this video would rapidly start looking like a conspiracy theory board. So for your sanity and mine, I'm going to give you the Inhuman history and the way that their powers work as it stands in current canon chronologically, which means that we're going to begin in space. Most of you have probably heard of the Kree, at least in passing.
I know
They're
the Kree.
one of Marvel's premier spacefaring empires, and of course they have been in the MCU, though in the comics, their early lore is a lot weirder. The earliest known members of the Kree resemble Earth cavemen, except for the fact that they're, you know, blue. But they did not evolve into their more human-like appearance naturally. Rather, they were experimented on by an alien race known as the Progenitors. Despite looking incredibly cool, the Progenitors don't have a lot of lore to them, mostly just because they have not appeared in a lot of comics. They are a classic but cool cosmic sci-fi trope, a hyper-advanced alien species that travels around the universe experimenting on native populations and then just leaving those populations to evolve naturally so that they can watch what happens. This is also the obligatory Al Ewing shout out that happens in basically every one of my videos at this point.
Who is Al Ewing?
If you take this man's writing out of Marvel canon, the entire universe collapses.
I don't know Al Ewing, so I don't know who this is. I only know, like, you know, Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby, and, well, I know some of the bad writers that came later on with, you know, that created, like, Paul and, some of the worst. I know Brendan Michael Bendis, which, as far as I know, no one really likes. I don't know that much about him. I know more of his bad works, but I've heard he has some good stuff. They haven't told me what that good stuff is, but they have some good stuff. Well, so, oh well, but yeah. So, I didn't know we were going to head into the Kree Empire. I know we have the Kree, the Skrull, and the last one that always keeps escaping me. It's the Kree, the Skrull, and the last one that has, usually aliens that we run into when we're dealing with the X-Men. I think Dr. Xavier was dating their queen at one point. Yeah.
The progenitor experiment that accelerated
Oh, yeah,
the evolution
this!
of the Kree used a mutagenic substance known as Primogen. We're not going to be talking a lot about it now, but it is going to be really important in just a minute
so
or
wait,
two.
these were the guys who did it. Okay.
Now we're going to fast forward from their creation to a single X-Men comic. We started in Fantastic Four, then went to Cosmic
Giant
Space Empire
size
stuff,
annual.
and now we're in X-Men. That conspiracy theory board comment I made a minute ago, yeah, I was not exaggerating. This comic introduces us to a magical item called the Crystal of Ultimate Vision.
What?
I have no idea what this thing actually is. Its origin is never explained. It's a magic space crystal, comic books, whatever.
Alrighty.
The crystal can provide those who access its power with infinite wisdom. However, to use its power, you have to pass a magic test. And if you fail this test, the punishment is that your entire species gets evolutionarily stagnated, which is
Oh. That's a pretty steep price for just one person to mess around with this thing.
a really weird term that I'm not sure I fully understand, but I'll make my best guess.
Yeah.
This is once again obviously just an example of comic book quote-unquote science, but it seems like it just removes the ability for your species to adapt.
Evolve.
There can be no more genetic variation or something or other. I don't know. This was in an X-Men comic, and so the point of it seems to be that it will remove the ability for humans to mutate, which obviously in an X-Men comic would be a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Even so, the crystal is not like that important even to X-Men stuff. It is
like Storm said, today is as good a day as any to die. Too bad she isn't here, so I can return the
plot device in this one issue and does not appear much outside of that.
Also, Wolverine is
the
naked.
Crystal of Ultimate Vision does have one more bit of relevance, as apparently at some point in history, a member of the Kree tried to get it and failed the magical test.
Okay, so to my knowledge, there has never been an exact stated, but we know that the Kree face dormant evolution, which has never gotten a full explanation. A member of the Kree was shown in the flashback as a shot of the crystals to connect to the dots. Okay, so is this what's going to happen to the Inhumans? I'm not sure how this is related, but I feel like he's going to tell us in a minute. Also, I wanted to ask, what do you guys think of the Kree? I just have a question. What do you guys think of the Kree and the Skrull empires? Like, they've both been around Earth more or less once or twice, but they don't get the most, like, big arcs. Well, except for, like, you know, that one where Secret Invasion.
Incredibly specific sci-fi fantasy curse was triggered, and the genetic variation potential of the entire Kree species was slowed to a halt. This was a big problem for them, as adaptation is very important for a wide-scale spacefaring species.
Yeah,
you
makes
need people
sense.
to be able to adapt to different planets and environments. So they began running experiments in an attempt to start their evolution process back up. A bunch of these experiments were conducted on primitive alien species across the galaxy, running on a nice head start since the Kree themselves had been evolved artificially. With the information that they had about their own origins, the main goal of their experiments was to reproduce Primogen. One of the species chosen for these tests was early humanity.
Which is
not chosen arbitrarily either. The Kree picked humans because they had already been proven as relatively easy to manipulate genetically. The Celestials had done it before, which is the canon origin of the mutant gene in the Marvel Universe, and the Kree were just like, hey, maybe we can do that too. The early experimentation happening on Earth showed quite a bit of promise. The Kree were quickly able to replicate Primogen in some form, though it was species-specific and only worked on humans. Given that it was the Primogen substitute originating on the planet they called Terra, the Kree named this new substance Terrigen, which is going to be an incredibly important word for the remainder of this video.
I know that.
Despite the fact that the human research was going pretty well, it was shut down before it could find any real success, mostly because when the Kree submitted their first findings to their techno-organic supercomputer, the Supreme Intelligence, it made a prediction that this research would inevitably lead to some sort of superhero who would overthrow the Kree Empire, and even though that was vague and nebulous, it was enough for the Kree to stop doing Earth stuff. The species that they...
In older Inhumans lore also states that the Kree were engineering Inhumans as super soldiers for the Empire. This is probably still true. The Kree also is probably just going to use their test subject as weapons as well. I mean, they're messing around with humanity, which usually ends bad for everyone that messes around with humanity, so you never really know. But yeah, I guess this is See, I thought the Celestials made the Eternals, the Inhumans, and the mutants as different offsplits of humanity. Or at least, I think that was explained at one point. Maybe not. Either way, you know.
Experimented on remained, though, and this is the extra information tacked on to the beginning of the first origin from Fantastic Four. They were a species that evolved alongside humanity and grew up a lot faster, but this was because they were experimented on by the Kree. The one minor difference between this first description and the current canon timeline is a brief switch up to the order of events. As per the first telling of their history, the Inhumans gained power over their genetics and got superpowers, and then were driven into hiding by a fearful humanity. But as things currently stand, that was reversed. Humans still feared the Inhumans, but not because they were masters of genetics, they just had way better technology thanks to leftover stuff from the Kree. Deciding to separate themselves rather than fight a losing battle against the far superior
Okay, so they didn't make the technology, they just found it because it was left behind by the Kree. Okay.
Of the humans, the Inhumans created a secret civilization for themselves, naming it Atalan. This is the same thing as the Great Refuge, for note. The Marvel writers just decided to give it a better sounding name when the lore was expanded.
Yeah, the Great Refuge isn't great.
This is the point in the video where a recurring theme is going to rear its head, for better or for worse. Inhuman society is entirely ruled by genetics. This was technically present in the first Fantastic Four appearances, but mostly through offhand mentions, and usually by the villains. They would refer to the Inhumans as a superior race quite often, but it was never really addressed. When Inhumans lore was expanded, their ideas on genetics were expanded along with them. Now, at this point in the timeline, they had not cracked Terrigen yet. The Kree had used it on them, but they had not taught the experiment subjects how to use it.
Of course.
So Terrigen was there, but the Inhumans weren't really sure what to do with it. They did, however, still have genetic modification in their history, and so it was a very relevant part of life.
Yeah.
The ruling body of Atalan was known as the Genetic Council, and it consisted of members who, by metrics that have never been detailed, were deemed to be the most genetically superior representatives of the race.
What does that even mean?
Among the Genetic Council, there was a king, and that king was surrounded by the royal family. It is worth noting that the king was not really a line of succession. They were chosen from the Genetic Council, and that did not mean that it would always pass down from parent to child. But since it was genetic in nature, houses of royals were a common thing. Obviously, the topic of a genetically superior ruling body is kind of an uncomfortable one, but I will say that I don't think it is necessarily bad in this context. After all, the Inhuman civilization only exists in the context of them being experiments into genetic variation.
I suppose
it makes sense that this would become a pillar of their future society. I think that is just good world building. What matters then is how the writers treat this concept and whether they represent the idea of genetic superiority as a good or bad thing. I'll go ahead and give you a little preview of how that's going to go. It's hit or miss, but for this part, I'm still just going to present the Inhuman history as it stands in canon without going into the implications, so we will address all of that as we get to it. Atalan has a lot of kings over however many tens of thousands of years it existed, but the next one that is really relevant to Inhuman history is a man named Randak. Randak is a geneticist, and despite the somewhat suspect nature of his ruling power, he is usually represented as a good guy. Randak conducts a lot of experiments.
Okay, so I want to do timeline events around Randak, and those early stories have been described in a few conflicting ways, so I just picked one and stuck with it. All the events did happen, that's what matters. Okay, so I didn't think that they were ruled by genetics. That's, how do you even quantify that? Do they go through, like, tests to test their durability? Do they, like, obviously it's not that well defined, but, I'm not even sure how you would do that. It just seems a little wishy-washy, I don't know. I sure as hell didn't know this about the Inhumans when we were going in here. Because I just thought they were a bunch of weirdos, honestly, but,
experiments on Inhuman biology, which does kind of play into the genetic fixation of his civilization, but his interest in this is usually written as genuine scientific curiosity,
instead
not anything
of
that is
malice.
motivated by racism or superiority, so he's fine.
Okay.
This curiosity would change the course of Inhuman society forever, though, as Randak was the one to crack the mystery of Terrigen.
Oh.
Terrigen in its natural state is a solid and relatively stable crystal, but when subjected to a very specific chemical process, it will emit a vapor known as Terrigen mist. And this
we're
stuff
getting the
gets
Terrigen
crazy.
mist here.
When a person with inhuman genetics, by which I mean a descendant of the original
Original
experiments, is exposed to Terrigen mist, it will cause their
them
body
to-
to undergo extremely rapid mutation. A cocoon will
sort
be
of
formed
evolution.
around their body, and they will stay in this cocoon
Terrigen
for
cocoon in
a
the park.
variable amount of time. It can take a few minutes, it can also take several days, depending on a number of factors, including how severe the mutation is and how much Terrigen they were exposed to.
Okay,
This
good to
process
know.
is known as Terrigenesis. And when
Terrigenesis.
Terrigenesis is done, who knows what comes out the other side, really?
So it
After
is-
all, Terrigen was originally made as an unfinished prototype of a substance designed to kickstart dormant evolution.
That bit
It is
I do know.
extremely chaotic. So to put it bluntly, Terrigenesis basically takes your genetic code and shoves it into a blender.
Which is
Randak
horrifying.
did not immediately know this, though. In the early stages of his research, the exact details and potential dangers of Terrigenesis were not yet discovered. But Randak was also evidently the excitable type of scientist,
Oh,
and thus
no.
immediately tested out his findings on himself.
Oh.
Now, here is something I've never said before, and don't think I will ever get the opportunity to say
That's
again.
not okay.
This comic book genius
Was an
scientist
experiment.
testing out an experimental genetic procedure on himself went really well, actually.
What?
I know, it
That-
feels wrong,
Yeah.
but I'm serious.
I thought
Not
we were gonna
only
get-
did Randak not get horribly mutilated by the Terrigenesis,
Is that Khan?
he gained cool psychic powers out of the deal and
Kang?
used them responsibly. Randak vowed
Huh.
to use his abilities in the defense of his people and follow
Kang is-
through on that. When some Kree came back to Earth to check on their experiments,
Mm-hmm.
Randak fought them off to protect Attilan.
Makes
He
sense.
didn't even let his new power corrupt him after this. Randak canonically stayed super cool. You might expect that
Alright.
a ruler who discovered a new form of giving superpowers to people would hoard it for himself or the
Of
elite.
course, yeah.
But no, Randak made the Terrigenesis process available to all people regardless of status. I told
Wow.
you, Randak is actually a great leader.
Yeah,
He was
surprisingly
not
enough.
perfect, though. King Randak did have one big fault, which is, as I mentioned just a minute ago, being the excitable type of scientist.
Oh, no.
He
He gets
probably
too excited.
should have tested Terrigen a little bit more before releasing it on a full public level, as it did cause a couple of problems.
Yeah,
There's
that
going to
sounds
be a whole
about right.
section dedicated to weird Inhumans later in this video, so I can really hammer the point home, but Terrigenesis can do a lot. It is radical genetic alteration in the context of
Which is
comic book science,
not
where
a good
logic
idea.
and reason need not apply. Most people who experience it get cool superpowers, or at least aren't changed enough to be terribly affecting. There are exceptions, though.
What
Sometime
the hell?
shortly after
Oh,
Randak opened
God. I'm not prone to any. Oh, God, this poor man.
Terrigenesis to everybody, access had to be restricted again for safety reasons, as in the comic,
Yeah.
there are enough mutations described very ominously as radically non-human that people
Radically
started getting worried.
non-human, huh?
Because of this, and also because the general concept of Terrigenesis was understandably controversial at a foundational level, the Society of Attilan underwent some schisms in the following years, some of which were bad enough to cause full splits.
Oh.
Some groups had differing enough opinions on
Wait,
Terrigenesis
I know that
to
place.
leave Attilan entirely, forming different tribes or civilizations of Inhumans in other parts of the world.
I
The
know.
biggest three are Oralan in Greenland, Utalan in Mozambique, and
Uzaland and Mozambique, huh?
Lux in Italy, though there are a lot of others that are more minor or entirely unnamed. Point is, Terrigenesis caused Inhumans to spread all over the globe, which is a fact that will be very important later. The
Okay.
majority of the Inhumans would continue to live in Attilan, though, so that's where we will continue the timeline from. For anyone curious, Attilan was later confirmed to be originally located on a small island somewhere in the North Atlantic Ocean, though in the
Okay.
early 80s, it was relocated to the moon. This is
Oh.
a weird little storyline. In
Okay.
Fantastic Four, issue 240, it is revealed that the Inhumans are beginning to get sick because of rising pollution levels on Earth, and so they just take their entire city and go to the moon.
and
they
stick
would
it on the
remain there
moon.
for like 30 years. That probably contributed to the Inhumans being like side characters for the main Marvel universe.
Yeah, I just thought their civilization was always on the moon, so, yeah. That's where my original thought was they're weird, evolved humans that live on the moon. But apparently that wasn't always the case, or it might have never been, because there's still Inhumans that live on that aren't part of the civilization that live on Earth. Which is, alright. I guess, also the hidden pockets of Inhumans that do still just look human and live normal lives and don't necessarily live in these other secret, places that Inhumans did. Okay. Things are getting crazier, but alright, they just lifted up their city and stuck it on the moon.
They didn't often have to get involved in big Earth-based crossovers or events
because they're just on the moon.
On Earth.
They were just on the moon.
That little tangent aside, we were talking about Teragenesis. After a lot of study, the risks of the process were minimized enough that it could be opened up to the public again.
Okay.
It was not safe for everybody, but through rigorous analysis of the exact genetic factors that went into each type of transformation, the Inhumans were able to predict roughly what would come out the other side.
Roughly.
They never got it exact. What Teragenesis would do to somebody was always a gamble, but they would be able to predict if the process would be more like a body horror movie than a superhero comic.
Okay,
and
we don't need
a
any Cronenberg.
You just wouldn't do it. It's also important to note at this stage.
Yeah, the culture of Teragenesis has changed and retconned a lot over the years, and sometimes it was mandated, sometimes it's limited, sometimes it's a mix, chosen to present the origin because it's more recent and also most interesting of the... Yeah, I feel like it should be a choice at the end of the day, because otherwise we get into a bit of the EWE stuff involving, ruling through your genetics, if you catch my meaning. It makes things a bit more problematic, if we're going to be completely honest here. But on that note, yeah, allowing them to choose where they want or not and being able to predict what will come out makes things a lot more efficient. Being able to tell what's going to happen to you if you suddenly step out, take this Terrigen mist or whatever.
That Teragenesis was optional, though it was heavily encouraged in Inhuman society. Teragenesis became something of a coming-of-age ceremony for the Inhumans. Inhuman kids are basically indistinguishable from human kids, but once they reach maturity, they enter a specialized chamber, are exposed to Terrigen mists, and come out the other side transformed. They then take a new name fitting their altered appearance, and are welcomed into full Inhuman society, which is really cool world building. The general concept of an advanced alien species coming down to a planet and artificially evolving a native species is a pretty common sci-fi trope, but you don't often see those species continue to be aware of where exactly they came from. That is pretty much the case with the Inhumans.
Yeah, they completely know where they came
were
from.
genetic experiments, and therefore, as their civilization has grown, those elements have persisted, leading to things like the Teragenesis process.
Millions of years ago, your race manipulated our bloodline to create perfect living weapons. Your ancestors intended the Inhumans to be an elite military force that could allow the Kree to completely dominate galaxy and the Earth. Okay, so they really were just making weapons here.
This specific type of world building is also really important in the context
Medusa's hair has
of
gotten
the
bigger
Marvel
and bigger.
universe. I'm sure a lot of you have already noticed a lot of parallels between the Inhumans and the X-Men, but those parallels are intentional to a degree. Mutation, in the X-Men sense of the word, is a very random, chaotic thing. It can strike at any time, and it can strike anyone in any human civilization, often twisting their appearance and then making them discriminated against.
Yep.
The Inhumans kind of read like a what-if scenario for the X-Men. What if the mutation had just as chaotic of an outcome, but the triggering scenario was predictable? Teragenesis does not happen at random. You have to be exposed to a very specific substance in a very specific way. This means that their society built up around that concept of mutation in a way that the X-Men mutants never got to. For now, though, that is all I really need to say about the early history of the Inhumans. You now have a good idea of where they came from and how their society and powers work. This means I get to skip forward quite a bit in the timeline to a part of the video that I promised way earlier.
And that is...
Zooming way forward into the future, long past the reign of Randak, we reach another relevant Inhuman leader, King Agon. Now, King
Agon?
Agon himself is not particularly important, but remember how I said the rulers of the Genetic Council often belong to royal houses?
Yeah.
King Agon led the House of Agon, and his descendants would become
Black
the
Bolt.
Inhuman royal family that we most often see. Now, finally, I'm going to individually address all the members of the Inhumans that we saw in their first Fantastic Four appearances.
Okay, here we go.
This is the modern-day House of Agon, frequently referred to as just the Royal Family, or as I'm going to call them, simply the Royals.
Alright.
There are typically 7 core members of the
7.
Inhuman Royals, all of whom were
Alrighty.
also present in the group's first appearances. The roster has remained shockingly stable
Skyrim
over
music.
the decades, which makes my job very easy. We will begin with the one who is most often the leader of the group,
Black
and
Bolt.
conveniently the most known among the general public. I am talking,
yeah.
of course, about Black Bolt. Even though most Inhumans have never really been A-list characters, Black Bolt does get brought up in pop culture discussions quite a bit more than the rest of them. And while
yeah.
he is an interesting enough character, there's no sense denying it, the reason Black Bolt is the most popular is because of his powers.
And
The
his,
actual
the thing that
explanation
stops him.
behind Black Bolt's powers
Okay, I'm gonna say, as powerful as you are rumored, such noble king, transformation and electron manipulation, sweet, but that takes down just about everything, doesn't it? I mean, possibly.
weirdly complicated. At the most fundamental technical level, his ability is psychically controlling subatomic particles, sometimes described as electrons, sometimes gravitons, sometimes a secret third thing that they just refer to as an unknown particle. Somebody on the Marvel Wiki, thankfully not me, has compiled a very
God.
detailed summary
Power to
of how
control
exactly Black
harness
Bolt's abilities
electrons.
function. I'm going to put it on the screen right now,
Screen,
but I'm not going to read it to you all
gravitational
because
flight.
it is paragraphs long. Luckily, Black Bolt's power is in practice simple enough that I can summarize it in 2 words. Sonic Blast.
Okay.
Black Bolt's voice is one of the most destructive forces on the planet.
With a whisper,
I'm not
he can
power
destroy a
scaling
lot of
type,
things.
Really, but if I were putting him into a sort of ranking, his energy output would have to be in the highest tiers of whatever metric people are using right now. This is already pretty cool. I love a good Sonic
Ruler
powered
of the
character.
Inhumans, genetic perfection with a voice that shakes the heavens. Really, yeah. I mean, Thanos was able to tank that hit from Black Bolt, but it was still a hell of a hit. Like, him screaming is one of the most horrifying things that can happen, and yeah.
Character, but I've also gone on record saying many times that what makes a strong superpower
Also, I forget that he
interesting
can
is
fly.
not what it can do, but what it can't. And in the case of Black Bolt, what he cannot do with the power is turn it off.
Yeah, he
Literally
can't speak.
any vocal noise that the King of the Inhumans makes is
I win.
wildly destructive, whether he wants it to be or not. The tiniest
What
whisper
the
is
hell
enough
is
to
this?
destroy buildings, and if he ever
looks
does
so
a full-on
silly.
scream, we don't really see Black Bolt at full power often, but it has been stated that it could split the planet in half. This means that Black Bolt can never talk, or at least never outside of a fight.
So does he know
and if he
sign
needs
language, I
to communicate,
guess?
he has to do so through writing, sign language, or other similar methods. In his first appearances, his mutism was explained as an evil plot by Maximus, and his powers were just like weird electromagnetic energy manipulation, which he still can do in the modern day. But as
Okay,
like
apparently
everything
fly.
in Inhumans, his lore expanded over the decades.
Of course.
In the current canon, Black Bolt's powers are explained as him being very unique among the Inhumans because he was subject to a very unethical Terrigenesis experiment.
Oh.
His father, King Agon, was trying to amplify the powers that an Inhuman could gain through the process, and thus subjugated his wife and unborn child
Oh
to
my God.
Terrigenesis while Black Bolt was in the womb.
That sounds like a terrible
The
idea.
trial was a success in that the baby was given stronger powers than average, but, you know, he couldn't control them at all. Now,
Oh,
fortunately for
God.
everybody in Attilan, his voice was not as destructive when he was
Oh,
a child,
thank
but it
God.
was still incredibly damaging. So, as a baby, Black Bolt was locked in a soundproof chamber and immediately began training on how to live life, never making a noise.
That's a horrible thing for a kid to go through. Not being able to make a noise, even as a kid, is, yeah. That explains why there's a whole ritual for this sort of thing, so that they can, you know, train their abilities so they don't accidentally shatter the cosmos with something with a whisper. Or, you know, maybe sneeze and suddenly destroy an entire planet. I honestly, I just thought this was his superpowers. Because like I said before, I didn't know much of the differences between something like an Inhuman and an X-Man or a mutant. So this is, I'm gonna say eye-opening, mostly due to the fact of I had no idea about a lot of this. Huh. It's nice lore, not gonna lie. So yeah, Black Bolt, very interesting, very, I can't say charismatic because the man doesn't really speak unless he absolutely has to, but very interesting. I'll admit, I never really liked the little wings he has, though. I think those are a little goofy, adding on to the design, but that's just me.
After 19 years of conditioning, Black Bolt was deemed stable enough to re-enter society, which he did not get to enjoy for very long, as almost immediately after he gained his freedom, his younger brother Maximus, who we will be talking about in a couple minutes, almost got everybody in Attilan killed.
What?
This was due to the Kree, who had still been monitoring the Inhumans this entire time.
Of course they have.
Maximus tried to betray his people to gain favor with the aliens that created them, but before his plan could be put into motion, Black Bolt noticed it and used his voice to destroy the invading Kree ship, saving his race. But unfortunately, the wreckage of that ship crashed onto the palace, killing a bunch of Inhuman leaders, including the king and queen. This tragedy meant that Black Bolt had barely any time to experience normal life before the mantle of king was passed down to him, and he had to bear the responsibilities of leadership.
I thought they would have blamed him or something.
Well, technically Marvel would kind of jam another chapter in the middle of this.
Of course. You are indeed strong indeed, young prince, but you dare not to employ your deadliest weapon, your destructive voice, so close to your comrades. Pity you might have made a fine king.
Where after King Agon died, Black Bolt's cousin was appointed as viceroy, but he was super evil, so Black Bolt ends up overthrowing him. It ends up in the same place. Black Bolt is king. Understandably, due to his tragic backstory,
Black got a lot of
Bolt is
muscles.
usually represented as a very stoic figure and typically a responsible leader, though he does also do some very dumb stuff on occasion, which we will be talking about in great detail later in this video. Oh, there also is one really, really, really important fact that I definitely need to mention about Black Bolt before we move on. Black Bolt is not actually his real name. That is just a nickname. And his actual name is Blackagar Boltagon.
Okay, comic writers, what the hell? You don't have to put the name in there. I can't take this name seriously whatsoever. Blackagar Boltagon? What? You didn't need to give him a real name. You could have just be like, well, everyone knows him as Black Bolt. You could have made a funny thing, but some comic writers always need to do the thing where it's like, no. You see, he is named Blackagar Boltagon. What? You know, I thought he would have been named after the house he was in or something like that. I wasn't prepared for Blackagar Boltagon at all. That came out of nowhere to me. I just want to explain that before we continue on. That is, I'm holding back my laughter just a bit here.
I don't even have a follow-up. Just yeah, okay. Continuing from Mr. Boltagon, we get to his wife, who we've already talked about a little bit, Medusa. Full name, Medusalith Amaquelin Boltagon. Because I guess all the Inhuman royals are just going to have a very certain aesthetic to their names. Medusa's inhuman ability is, as I mentioned way earlier, control over her hair.
Your thoughts were found a way to become art. The Civil War, Hulk, those secret meetings you've been having.
Naturally is also far stronger and more durable than human hair by orders of magnitude.
It makes sense.
She doesn't really have a tragic early backstory like that of her husband. In fact, her history is kind of cute. She first met Black Bolt when he was in his soundproofing chamber, but they fell in love through that and created their own form of sign language. They're also second cousins, apparently, which I genuinely did not know until I was fact-checking information in this video and just kind of saw them listed as that. So, that makes it a little less cute.
That does. What the hell? Writers, you don't need to... just because they're royals doesn't mean we need to go the full 10 miles. or the full yard for making them like the royals. This is like the royals of old.
Medusa is typically married to Black Bolt. I do have to put typically in there because the nature of decades-old comic book characters means that all of their relationships are going to be off again,
especially
on again.
relationships.
But usually she is queen of the Inhumans and has the responsibility of taking over for Black Bolt whenever he does something stupid, which happens a decent amount.
Okay.
Medusa probably also has the second best relationship with other superheroes among the royal family. She is very close with the Fantastic Four and has been a member of the team on several occasions, and in most cases, she is more in favor of humans and Inhumans working together as opposed to them splitting up and being isolated.
Alright.
Speaking of humans and Inhumans being very close with one another, we now go from Medusa to her sister, Crystal. Yes,
alright, we're getting on to Crystal.
Siblings. Continuing the pattern of very long real names, Crystalia Amaquelin is usually referred to as the Inhuman princess, but this is not because she is the child of the royals, she's just sisters with the queen.
Yeah.
Crystal's ability is control over the 4 classical elements.
Earth,
those
water,
being
fire,
Earth,
and
fire,
wind.
water, and air. If you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender, yeah, it's essentially the same as that. Since the Inhumans are science characters more than magic characters, technically her powers are described as like a psionic interaction with materials on an atomic level, but that doesn't really make any sense. She can manipulate elements, don't overthink it.
Okay,
now,
I won't.
I gotta be honest here. I didn't know too much about Crystal before doing research for this video. She's been in a lot of comics, over 500 of them, but despite that, I couldn't really have told you too much about her individually.
Really?
And when I began looking into it, all I could really find was, to put it bluntly, her being shuffled around as a love interest character to different parts of the Marvel Universe.
I see, she's one of those characters.
Bad. I didn't want that to be her profile in the video, so I decided to double fact check, and I messaged one of my friends who is a big classic Inhumans fan. My question was pretty simple. Quote, am I missing something, or is a lot of Crystal's history just her kind of getting passed around to different love interests? And the response from my friend was, oh, it absolutely is. She is messy. So I guess I wasn't missing anything. Now,
question, what do they mean by messy? Do they mean as a character? Is this her overall choices? Is it just the writers doing it? Are they just using her as a... I kind of want to know what they meant by that, but, what do I even say here to that? Is their history messy? I'm actually kind of curious now about what's going on. I know, like, the big thing I knew was that her and Johnny Storm dated, and I knew this through the Marvel Ultimate Alliance game where you end up in Attilan, is that how it's pronounced? Attilan? In, near the final mission, where you can go around and talk to the Inhumans, who I had no idea even existed at that point. Though, you talk to Black Bolt and Medusa. Well, you don't really talk to Black Bolt. You talk to Medusa, who is translating for Black Bolt, because they're all 3D models, and I don't think the people had the money for, doing any sort of thing. But yeah. So, or I want to say doing any 3D modeling where they were doing sign language. But yeah, the Inhumans don't get mentioned much in the Ultimate Alliance games. I know there was a big push for the Eternals and the Inhumans, but yeah.
My worries have been confirmed by a secondary source. I can just tell you that, the reason Crystal has appeared in so many books is that she just sort of appears in the comics of whoever she happens to be dating at the time. Obviously, Crystal was introduced first as a love interest character for Johnny Storm, so she was in the Fantastic Four for a while because of that, even joining the team for a period. She would eventually break up with Johnny and leave the Fantastic Four, but then she went on to join the Avengers because she was dating Quicksilver.
I forgot the Quicksilver was on the Avengers.
And had a kid with, which we will be addressing later in the video.
That will happen? Also, that was really good art.
Break up with Quicksilver and then marry Ronan the Accuser.
What?
Yes, like that Ronan. This would be in a much later series, but it's part of diplomatic relations between the Inhumans and the Kree, and the comic does the whole political marriage that later turns real thing. So Ronan and Crystal actually do fall in love, but then they also end up breaking up. And if that
Okay.
wasn't enough, there's even a very brief comic that confirms, though through a retcon, that Crystal and Sentry had a fling in Crystal's
Sentry?
earlier days when she was mad at Johnny Storm
Who's
and
Sentry?
used Sentry
Oh,
as
Sentry.
a rebound. This is all a quick
I just
summary,
remembered
too.
Sentry.
Crystal has had multiple affairs over her history,
Okay.
not even always with superheroes. One time she had a brief thing with Black Knight, but she also cheated on Quicksilver with a random real estate agent who did not have any...
Okay, that just happens. Alright. Also, I have to check on something real quick, so I will be right back. Sorry, on that note, my family has a really old dog that, basically whenever she needs to scratch her back, just kind of starts shrieking. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. Because she just randomly does it and is like, I can't scratch my back. Let me summon by screeching. Yeah, she's been around for a while in the family, so, you know. Either way on that, Crystal really does get passed around a lot, huh? Like, she just chooses to have flings with a lot of different people, huh? Just with a random lawyer, with Quicksilver, Johnny Storm, Ronan the Destroyer. Okay, I guess she just hasn't found the relationship she wants, or she's just one of those people that doesn't... I don't know. I'm trying to explain comics' whole thing of having certain characters that just kind of get in relationships and then go. At least Felicia Hardy has a little bit of an explanation of she's kind of a wild spirit, but this, I don't know.
superpowers. He was just a guy. So,
Okay.
You see what I mean
Call her
about her just
Crystal.
kind of getting narratively shuffled around?
Yeah.
Crystal has been part of the Fantastic Four sphere and the Avengers sphere and the space and cosmic sphere, all via her different romantic relationships. It's like the defining feature of her character. This is not to
Okay.
say that I dislike
Defining
Crystal
feature
or
of
that
a
I think she's a
character.
bad character. She just is often written in a way that doesn't really do her any favors. As
Yeah,
a person,
sounds about
Crystal
right.
is fun and is genuinely very kind
Oh,
and loving.
cool.
She is just
Why is that
also
thing
a
on her head?
naive princess type who makes a lot of impulsive decisions.
That's what
Now,
she's
the three
run.
members of the royals that we have discussed-
That's what she's written as, the impulsive princess type. That's why she gets with a lot of... Oh, I see what they were going with now. Okay.
So far have been very closely related to each other. We have the king, the queen, and the queen's sister. The remaining few are a little bit
this
farther
dude.
out.
Gorgon.
And the next one is Gorgon, who is Black Bolt's cousin, and also one that we've talked about already. Gorgon is his
Gorgon.
real name. It is not short for something insanely long in this case, but we do also know his last name. He is Gorgon Petragon, which that sounds pretty cool,
Petragon,
actually. That
huh?
sounds like a D&D character name, and I vibe with it.
I just want to say this note, because every once in a while you will hear me whenever I'm doing something. Just be like, hey, Petra. His full name is Petragon. I don't know if he did this on purpose and made his name closer to this dude because he likes him, because he reads a lot of Marvel comics. He reads a lot of comics in general. So I didn't know. Petra, if you're watching this, tell us down below if you, because he's one of my mods that shows up randomly whenever we're doing reactions, so, yeah. If Petra's watching this, is this who you based your name after? If so, we're probably going to learn why, but I'm just going to go ahead and ask so I don't have to later. Why? Okay.
Gorgon's abilities are very obvious from appearance alone. He has super
Super
strength,
strength.
but it is concentrated especially in his legs. This is a cool, unique twist on a very common power, but beyond this, he doesn't do too much. As the royal family goes, Gorgon is one that appears less. Two of his brief storylines do give us some interesting insight into the Terrigenesis process, though. First off,
Yeah.
Gorgon is one of the few Inhumans that we've seen undergo secondary Terrigenesis.
Secondary?
Which is basically just what happens when you get put through the process another time.
Oh,
It's
that can
apparently
happen?
a very dangerous procedure, and even more unstable than regular Terrigenesis.
Oh.
Gorgon only underwent it because he was forced to as part of a shield experiment, and it turned him
Oh,
into a more
damn.
monstrous state, though he was cured later.
Okay,
His
that's
other
good.
storyline is in a similar vein when it comes to the possible downsides of Terrigenesis, and despite being a short arc, this one is actually pretty sad. Gorgon
Oh.
has a child named Petrus, and Petrus
Petrus?
went through Terrigenesis kind of against his will.
Oh, no.
Remember when I was talking about Inhuman culture, I said that Terrigenesis was not a mandatory thing, but
Yeah.
it was heavily encouraged at a societal level.
Oh.
Petrus did not actually want to go through Terrigenesis, but was pressured into it by his father, and
Oh,
instead of getting
no.
superpowers, had his body twisted and distorted, gaining
Oh,
a giant
no.
bull-like minotaur head, but not many other changes. This comes with no apparent superpowers, it is just a physical deformation.
Oh,
In
damn.
Gorgon's defense, though, this was not purely for societal reasons. It was in the midst of the city's evacuation as it was being approached by Thanos. Fearing for his young
Yeah.
son's life and wanting him to gain powers that he could use to protect himself, Gorgon forced his kid into the process early without considering the possible outcomes, and Petrus's
not
deformation
good.
was a consequence of that.
Not
I
good
said
at all.
earlier that when it
Last
comes
name Petrus Petragon, and he is just 9 years old when going through this. Oh, that poor boy. That poor boy.
to the Inhumans being a genetically focused society, the way that writers treat it is very hit or miss. I think this is one of the better examples. Not because this was a good thing, obviously. This is
Yeah.
a very sad story, but it is an interesting one and shows a much darker angle of how the Terrigenesis process has affected human culture. I wish this arc was longer, because boy, is it fascinating from an ethical perspective. We have gotten similar storylines in the past, though, which is a great transition into the next member of the Royals. This is Triton, another cousin of Black Bolt, and his Terrigenesis ability has pros and cons to it. Much like Gorgon, Triton's powers are immediately apparent at first glance. He is aquatic.
Yeah.
Not amphibious, Triton is an aquatic being. Post-transformation, Triton is an incredible underwater combatant. He's fast, he's strong, he can sense movements at a great distance, and he cannot breathe air in any capacity.
God,
Triton
that's what
will
I thought you were
die
going
in about
with this.
5 minutes if he does not have access to a water supply.
So,
Fortunately for Triton, he did
Okay.
have a good support system growing up. His mother was a biologist, and after her son's Terrigenesis, she switched her specialty to ocean life so that she could understand how to better care for him, which is an incredibly sweet minor detail, actually.
Yeah.
Thanks to advanced Inhuman technology, he is able to exist on land, but to do so, he needs to be constantly wearing a suit or hooked up to some sort of apparatus, which will keep him hydrated. This puts some limits on how well he can exist in Inhuman society, being the only aquatic one there. This is already pretty interesting.
He lives on the moon.
Of course, we had to have a major
water.
Inhuman character whose transformation isolated them from everybody else. But where things get really, really fascinating is the dynamic that this causes with his brother, also the next member of the royal family, Karnak.
Okay,
Karnak is Triton's younger brother, which is very important information because by the time he was born, Triton had already undergone Terrigenesis, and the family was understandably wary of what that could mean for their other child. Thus, Karnak was raised without ever going through the transformation process. This is, once again, a fascinating world-building detail for Inhuman culture. Even though Terrigenesis is vital to Inhuman society, the unpredictable nature of it means that there is an aura of fear around the whole thing. Karnak does have superhuman abilities, though. He never went through Terrigenesis, not even in his adulthood,
Karnak, yeah, his
but he
own
was
title,
not
huh?
simply left to his own devices, powerless in a civilization where everybody else has some form of power. Instead, his father sent him to a place called the Tower of Wisdom at a young age, and he trained here for decades, becoming a master martial artist. His capability does not stop there, though. Karnak is not a regular martial arts master. He is a comic book martial arts master.
Do all the
means
crazy
that he does
stuff.
have a signature skill that is basically a superpower for all intents and purposes, even if it isn't a genetic one. Karnak can detect weaknesses in things, allowing him to know exactly where to strike for maximum effectiveness. It is a simple ability, but a devastatingly destructive one. Karnak can split a block of diamond simply with a well-placed blow, earning him the nickname, and also kind of superhero code name, Karnak the Shatterer.
Okay, interesting. I didn't think any of them would be not having the Terrigen stuff on them, but martial arts fighter is not what I would have thought when I looked at the original design of Karnak and his giant head thing. That is not what I would have thought, but still pretty cool. Not gonna lie. So, yeah. Interesting so far. We got a lot of interesting ones. It is still a very cool little bit of plot or lore that he never went through it due to his family worrying about the possibility of him never being able to breathe air or live like them ever again. It's an understandable fear for any parent to be like, well, something bad happened to our first kid, so we're going to be extra careful with the youngest because of what happened the first time. Like, if something messed up happened to my first kid, like, let's say we're Inhumans here, and from that, I'm like, I'm never going anything near that again. Like, there is no way in hell you are laying that near my kid. Like, sure, it might be encouraged, and I'm guessing he's going to be looked down upon for this, so we'll see where it goes, right?
This power does also work on people, and I mean
that in
multiple senses of the term. Yes, obviously he can cause
Wait, can he do like the North Star punch, or
but he can
fingertip?
also detect psychological weaknesses, meaning that Karnak can occasionally take his enemies off the board without even needing physical confrontation.
That's kind of crazy.
I think Karnak is really cool. He is probably my favorite member of the royal family, and his personality is a big factor in that. You would think that being trained in martial arts from a young age and having a power related to psychological weaknesses, he would be a very calm, centered, balanced man.
Let me guess,
but
he's
no,
not.
Karnak is kind of a
I don't care
dick.
about your name. Names
He
are
is
not
also
important
one
to
of
me.
the few members of the Royals to get his own solo series, which does make sense given his concept. By definition, he is a little bit more distanced from the Inhumans than the rest of his family, and with his powers can fit just as well into the martial arts sphere of Marvel, where he does occasionally appear. At this point, we are almost done with the profiles on the royal family. I said there were 7 core members, and we've covered 6: the king, the queen, the princess, and several cousins. Who is left? But the family dog!
Oh!
This is Lockjaw.
Lockjaw.
Is
looks
a
so
giant
goofy.
dog that can teleport.
Oh,
Not just
he can
himself
teleport.
either. He can also teleport people in his immediate vicinity, earning him a spot as one of the best companion characters in all of Marvel. Because for one, he's a big funny dog, and for two, he is a fantastic tactical asset because he provides instant transport for your entire group.
Yeah.
Enhancing this power even further is the fact that Lockjaw can track targets across space and even across dimensions.
What?
How can he do that?
He sniffs them.
He can smell them. Because of course, the teleporting dog can smell across dimensions.
It can smell across space itself. He's a good boy. He's definitely going up there with Bats. And, well, if you don't know Bats the Ghost Dog, other people can probably fill you in down below, but I love Bats the Ghost Dog. He's great. I love that he's a big fan of Spider-Man. But yeah. We got Lockjaw here. The good boy. Because you always need a good boy. You always need a good boy.
This is an amazing concept that works on every layer. There is one really big question that Lockjaw's mere existence poses,
and that is?
What exactly is he? Because we
Yeah.
know he's an Inhuman. Lockjaw
Yeah.
has Inhuman genetics. That has
But
been
he's also a
explicitly
dog.
confirmed in several places. But also, Inhumans are born looking like people.
Yeah.
Was Lockjaw once a guy?
Guy? Yeah.
Well, if you look at
The
The
Thing.
Thing, issue 3 from 1983, it appears that the answer is yes.
What?
In this comic, Ben
No.
Grimm goes on a little teleporting adventure with Lockjaw, and at the end of it, the dog, who had never talked before this comic, speaks and confirms that he was once human in appearance, and after undergoing pterogenesis, was warped into a giant dog creature that is apparently so deformed internally, it hurts for him to talk.
Oh. 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 I feel really bad now. That's actually really sad. I thought he was just a good dog that, I don't know, got, evolved with them. That's kind of just really sad. Ugh, I definitely feel real bad for him, because what else would you feel for this? This poor man that's transformed into a dog that hurts to talk. I feel bad for a few of the Inhumans, honestly.
Given that Lockjaw is historically a fun, silly mascot character
Yeah.
at Marvel, I know that a lot of your jaws dropped at that reveal.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to say that Marvel also had a similar reaction.
Of course.
The retcon of Lockjaw into
Oh, thank
being
God.
once a regular man was wildly unpopular and
Of
would
course.
get undone pretty shortly after this in the funniest way I have ever seen a retcon happen.
And that is...
A few years later, in an X Factor comic,
X Factor,
Quicksilver,
huh?
who was also present during the Lockjaw incident, would flash back to that moment and tell everybody that this whole reveal about the dog's true origin was a joke.
Oh.
And that's not me paraphrasing here. It was
Oh,
literally...
well, I guess why then. But he's a dog. It was a joke. Madrox, Gorgon, utilized Jock's antennae as a high-powered transmitter as a prank on our old friend Grimm. And Grimm thought he found a soulmate
a
upon
joke
his
that
and swallow
Karnak
it.
and Gorgon
You mean he still isn't catched on? For heaven's sake, don't be
were playing
telling him
on-
this. Oh, they were playing a joke. That's a pretty mean joke to just play on poor Ben Grimm, who, you know, that's mean.
Ben Grimm.
But
They
still,
used the little antenna on Lockjaw's head as a
That's what I
signal
bet you've been-
transmitter and had Gorgon do like a scary voice into a mic and tell Ben all of these horrible things about the dog's history. And none of it was true. There's even a shot of Gorgon talking into the mic and Karnak laughing in the
What the
background.
hell?
They were just screwing around with them.
No.
We know for a fact that this was not the original intent when the Thing comic was
Okay.
written. And we know this because the
Good.
writer of X Factor, Peter David, has explicitly confirmed it in an interview.
Oh.
Apparently, the Lockjaw retcon was wildly controversial at Marvel. Some people liked it, some people didn't. And by making it a prank, he could kind of appease both groups. The people who hated the Lockjaw retcon, which I do think was
I will say this, a lot of this art from X Factor is actually pretty damn good. I kind of know these guys from the old X-Men cartoon that I think I saw a few times. I don't know where I saw it, but I sure as hell didn't watch it the first time it got... Because I don't even think Fox Kids was... I don't think I was alive for that. But, yeah... Interesting, alright.
Most people could take Quicksilver's statements here as truth, meaning that the whole thing was a bit and none of it was accurate. However, the people who liked Lockjaw's origin being dark and edgy for whatever reason could believably think that Quicksilver was lying here because he was kind of being shady in this issue. Going forward from here, Marvel has treated Lockjaw's origin as definitely not a human, and in the
Oh,
years
good,
since this
good,
absolutely
good.
hilarious retcon, we have gotten a real origin story for
Okay,
him.
let's hear it.
Lockjaw's new origin has him start
Oh,
off
he looks
as
so
a
cute.
regular dog.
Puppy.
No inhuman genetics, nothing weird there. He is just a normal pet.
He's a dog.
But was exposed to Terrigen, or modified forms of it at least, as part of a scientific experiment, actually tying directly
Aw.
into Black Bolt's origin. Remember how Black Bolt underwent
A
Terrigenesis?
puppy's... She birthed the live puppy. Our experiment has
While
succeeded.
he was still in the womb, Lockjaw was an earlier test subject
Oh,
in
they're
that
testing
same
it on a
research.
dog.
Lockjaw's mother, once again just a regular dog, was somehow exposed to Terrigen in such a way that some of her unborn puppies developed supernatural characteristics.
Does that mean there's more
The exact
Lockjaws?
details of this are never fully described, and it doesn't work perfectly with other Inhuman lore because Terrigen is supposed to be a human-specific thing. But that will also get shaky as the canon continues.
I mean, Lockjaw
And either
is
way,
here.
This is a much better origin than him being a guy.
Yeah.
Now, with Lockjaw's origin, or origins, addressed, we are done with the core.
For those who don't know, I have a dog behind me who, if you hear the snorting, that is the dog. And right now I'm reaching my arm back to give her scratchies because, she's being a good dog. So, yeah.
Core members of the royal family. I said there were 7, we've done 7, but there is another character who is definitely worth addressing in this part of the video, even if he is not typically considered a royal, though he would like to be very, very much. This, of course, is Maximus. Maximus Boltagon, despite having a name that sounds like an anime finishing move, is not typically referred to by this name. He refers to himself as Maximus the Magnificent, and is referred to by everybody else as Maximus the Mad. Maximus's inhuman abilities are all mental in nature. He has
Okay.
vastly increased intelligence and psychic abilities that usually manifest as mind control in some way or another, but his powers are also really inconsistent and described differently in different comics.
Okay.
Even in his younger days, Maximus was an
This is
obsessive
completely side important to a role, but I noticed that it seems anyone goes through such a trackable character design change from dork to more than the Maximus. Alright. Yeah, he does. His design changes rapidly. Like, the other ones kind of keep the same look. He's changed a
and
lot.
selfish man, believing Inhumans to be superior to all other life, and himself
we go
to be
again.
superior to all other Inhumans. If you
Yeah.
recall from Black Bolt's origin section, as a teenager, Maximus tried to make a deal with the Kree at the cost of his people, just so that he could get knowledge of genetic manipulation from their predecessors.
Of course.
Black Bolt obviously foiled that plan by unleashing one of his first big screams, and a part of that story that I declined to mention until now is that Maximus was standing really close to Blackagar when this
Is he
scream
deaf?
went off. The combination of this extremely loud sonic attack and the way that it interacted with Maximus's own psychic powers drove him even more insane than he already was.
Okay.
To be very clear about what I mean by that, I don't mean that Maximus is insane because he's an evil supervillain who constantly tries to take over the planet. He is clinically insane. Maximus frequently does delusional stuff that seems nonsensical to everybody around him because it is nonsensical, but due to his own genius intellect, which is undeniable even through his insanity, Maximus always believes that he's in the right. My favorite example of this by far is in an Inhumans and Guardians of the Galaxy crossover, during which Maximus has multiple extended conversations with Groot. And when Rocket asks how the hell he is doing that, Maximus's exact response is, quote, "The mature dendritic form of King Groot."
The dendritic form of King Groot's people is robust and hardy. Often the organs of acoustic simply sound as repeating his name. All right, actually he's gonna say it. What am I doing?
The organs of acoustic generation become stiff and inflexible. It may sound as if he's simply repeating his name, but that is simply due to the hardened formation of his larynx. You must listen to the sigh of the breeze beneath it, the nuance of meaning.
He's just gonna say it's crazy.
Is any of this accurate information?
I don't know.
We have absolutely no idea. On the one hand, Maximus is incredibly intelligent and might have pieced together the latent language patterns behind "I am Groot." But on the other hand,
he might just be crazy
and making things up. Which is true, has never been confirmed.
That's kind of great.
As hilarious as that is, there isn't really that much more that I feel a need to say about Maximus, at least not in these quick summaries that I've been doing for the Royals. He is exactly what you think he is at the end of the day. He is the evil mad scientist brother of the Inhuman King. And he is a villain.
He's the Scar.
Most often, in fact almost exclusively, in Inhumans comics. He doesn't do a lot with the Marvel Universe at large, he is just a nefarious figure scheming against the king.
Yeah, like I said, he is the Scar to Mufasa here. He's mainly going to be the brother that is scheming to take over the throne for the most of it, and usually fails horribly. It's a trope that says as old as time itself. It's not exactly a bad trope, In that way, I guess he's kind of like Starscream. Just a weird thought that popped in my head about him comparing him to Starscream, but, you know. Yeah.
Now that I've covered Maximus, I have hit all of the Inhumans character profiles that I wanted to go over in this part of the video. We are shortly going to get back to their history and really start entering the controversial stuff. But before we get to that, there is one other very controversial fact about the Inhumans and their culture and society that I definitely needed to put in the video, but wasn't really sure where to put it. So I'm just going to stick it in here because that should work fine. Let's talk about the Alpha Primitives.
The what?
I teased earlier that the way Marvel writers have historically handled the Inhumans and genetic superiority has been hit or miss. And
this
the
is gonna
Alpha
be a
Primitives
miss.
are a very definitive miss. We've seen a couple good applications of these concepts already. Hopefully the character profiles have addressed that.
Yeah.
The Inhumans and their genetics and how all that plays into their society can be handled in a really good way.
Nuanced way,
when the implications are addressed properly.
Yeah.
When writers take the time and effort to dig into the ethics of Terrigenesis,
that's when you make good stories, when you dig into the meat of things and try to really comprehend things. Now, it doesn't always need to be like that. Things can be silly, goofy, whatnot, what have you. But for a good number of times, they can be. I mean, like I said, a lot of different comics have a lot of different sauce. It really does depend on what you know, want in something. Either way on that, yeah.
That can be used as a narrative vehicle to tell some really interesting stories and make some great points about a controversial topic. Anyway, the Alpha Primitives are a race of genetically engineered subhumans that the Inhumans use as slave labor. They are large, caveman-like humanoids that are artificially grown and then made to do all of the manual work that the rest of the Inhumans don't want to. The entire civilization of Attilan is built on the Alpha Primitives' backs. Literally, they live underground. Now, since they are artificially grown, the question is then raised of their consciousness level. If the Alpha Primitives are basically animals, that is one thing. I'm not advocating for growing animals as slave labor, but that is at the very least preferable to humans. Unfortunately, there is a Marvel guidebook from 2010 which explicitly...
With little fatigue, the Alpha Primitives' intelligence evolved them roughly to a 6-year-old capable of only simple thought and emotional reaction. Kind of docile... Has anyone ever read the book Brave New World? That's what I'm seeing in here. I had to read it when I was younger. Yeah, this is the feeling I'm getting from this. It's not a good one. Not a good one at all.
States that the Alpha Primitives have intellect roughly equivalent to a 6-year-old human child, which is not better.
No,
Marvel.
It's not. No.
Of course, a running thing that you've already seen with the Inhumans and will continue to see is that they do a lot of bad stuff, but that's not necessarily bad from a writing perspective. You can have characters do bad things in fictional media because then you can use that to give a moral and a lesson and an interesting story. If the Alpha Primitives are used for this kind of thing, then that is fine. However, the Alpha Primitives are usually antagonists. And let me actually just put this in video game terms. If Maximus is the boss-type villain for the Inhumans, then the Alpha Primitives are like his hordes of mindless minions that the heroes just kind of beat up as cannon fodder.
Oh, dear. Thus, at the touch of a button, the Alpha Primitives are unleashed, a feral, nonsensical horde of raging Inhumans under the control of none save Maximus. Oh, dear. This is definitely not better in any sort of terms here. This is definitely not good from my perspective, and I definitely don't think it's good from anyone at home's perspective. Yeah, what the hell?
There are a couple isolated arcs in which writers have tried to do something nuanced with the Alpha Primitives. They're usually not great, and even if they were good, they are dwarfed by the number of arcs where they are just mindless hordes to...
Oh, God. One orc even established that the humans can be transformed into Alpha... Oh my God. This just gets worse anytime we mention them, huh? That's, Oh, wow. What do I even say? You know what? I'm not going to say anything. We're just going to get ready to move on, because, yeah.
Be fought. Given this, in a slightly awkward but pretty
Surprisingly, this has not
understandable
been
move,
acknowledged again.
Marvel has not really tried to
Unsurprisingly,
retcon or actively fix the Alpha Primitives.
Oh.
Instead, they just kind of don't address them. The vast majority of comics with the Inhumans never mention the Alpha Primitives, and I kind of take it as a red flag when a writer does choose to bring them up. They're not relevant in modern canon.
Okay.
They have also not been actively decanonized, but they don't often matter. Now that we're all just a little bit more uncomfortable than we were a few minutes ago, I can move on. And actually, addressing the Alpha Primitives when I did works pretty well for the way that I'm trying to present the Inhumans. You have heard a lot of the good with these characters, and a lot of the bad.
So,
but
what are we dealing with now?
This is a hallmark of how the Inhumans have kind of always been.
Oh.
You can think of the Marvel Universe kind of like one big bubble with a lot of
Spider-Man
little
needs to be the
bubbles
biggest
inside
thing
of it,
here,
representing
honestly.
the different spheres of the world. One of them can be Spider-Man, one of them can be Avengers.
What
one of
symbol
them
is
can
the
be mutants
Inhumans?
and the X-Men,
the tiny little
etc.
thing.
They all have their nice little sets of characters. Usually, if you think of a Marvel person, you can identify the bubble that they would fit in.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah. Is this supposed to be Captain Marvel, or I don't know who the symbol that
But
is.
all of these bubbles connect and overlap. There are crossovers and events, but the Inhumans don't really get this in the same way. They definitely have their own bubble in this diagram that we're imagining. It is a lot smaller than the others, though, and only has one strong connection to a different sphere, that being the Fantastic Four. The Inhumans and the FF have always been very closely related, but you're not going to see the Inhumans be tightly tied to anything else. Returning to a point I made...
Individual characters ties Crystalloid specifically, but a few exist across the whole group. The closest connection would be Space Fairy, the Kree, which can expand over time. Yeah, the Kree... I don't know who gets usually paired up with the Kree, because the Skrull kind of, fight the Fantastic Four. Usually with Super Skrull, or we're dealing with other things, but I'm trying to think who the Kree usually deal with.
For the first 30 to 40 years of their existence, the Inhumans were like the Fantastic Four's quirky cousins. They were popular enough to get spotlight on a semi-regular basis, but never enough to be A-list or even B-list characters. They had the fans that they needed to stick around, and while they were never the most relevant, they were present and popular in the context of what they were. The group did find a bit of unexpected favor in the late 90s with a 12-issue series simply called Inhumans. This gave us a lot more expansion on Terrigenesis as a concept and the lore and implications around it, but the thing that really made it successful was that it was under the Marvel Knights imprint. For anyone not familiar with the company during this era, Marvel Knights was like a sub-brand of the publisher, under which Marvel would put out comics with more mature themes.
Why did they choose a specific name, Knights?
Inhumans got to be a bit more of a political drama, and since the Inhumans at a foundational level deal with a lot of serious and controversial topics baked right into their world building, them getting to take a mature tone worked quite well.
How did they handle this?
This paved the way for the Inhumans to do a little bit more in the coming years. They still weren't major, but a bit later they got the Son of M series, which...
Son of M? Let's see, from House of M comes Quicksilver, Son of M. I've never heard of this comic. Like, I've heard people talk about House of M. I've never heard of Son of M. You can tell me down below what it's about or whatnot, or if he's going to go into it. But, yeah, I have never heard of this from, like, any of my more comic book savvy friends.
Focused on Quicksilver in the aftermath of Scarlet Witch doing the whole No More Mutants thing and removing powers from much of the mutant population.
Yeah, I remember
Son
that
of M brought Quicksilver and Crystal's daughter, Luna Maximoff, back into the fold and showed Quicksilver stealing Terrigen from the Inhumans in hopes that he could use its genetic potential to reactivate latent mutant powers that Wanda had deactivated. Following this, Marvel decided to expand on the Inhumans in regards to their connection with the Kree. Attilan moved
I thought we were going to go with the
X-Men. Something of a mobile colony ship, and the Inhumans started interacting with the spacefaring Kree Empire directly, at one point merging with and then taking it over briefly, so that the royal family had control over the Kree Empire as well. This arc
Okay.
introduced a bunch of cool ideas spinning
these
out
are
of
the
their classic world building. The idea of universal Inhumans started to be seen, as the Kree did not just do their original genetic experiments on Earth. Other planets
Okay.
got similar treatment, and that means there are alien quote-unquote Inhumans out there that had never
Interesting. I just see horse people and I get confused a bit.
been
but
seen on
yeah.
Earth before. Now, I am skimming over this decade
War of
relatively quickly for
War of
reasons that will
Kings.
become apparent soon, but I did need to briefly mention the late 90s to early 2000s Inhumans because it was a pretty good time.
Okay.
The Inhumans were not major parts of the Marvel Universe,
They don't
but
necessarily
they were
need to
connected
be.
a little bit more than they had been, and in interesting ways. From the few things that I just described, it should be pretty clear that the writers were making an effort here. They were looping
That's
in
always
old
good.
world building, they were iterating on the concepts, there was more space stuff happening connecting to the Inhuman origins.
Which
a
they
lot
are
of
kind of
fun
space
stuff was
group.
going on, and there was an appreciation for the characters even though they weren't the biggest ones.
Okay.
Then, that would all change.
Oh boy.
For the next piece of this, we need to take a few steps back out of the Marvel Universe
And
into the actual history of Marvel as a company, which, yes, does mean we have reached the part of this video about real-world drama. The early 2010s were a surprisingly bitter time for Marvel, at the corporate level at least. Now, this might be surprising at first. This was also during the meteoric rise of the MCU, so you would think that this would be bringing in enough money to satisfy the business types.
Yeah.
But no, you stupid fool. Millions of
The one thing I've learned, the one thing I've known for a very long time, is that there is never enough money in the world to satisfy the business types. Because as soon as they think they can get a little bit more money, especially nowadays, they will do whatever it takes to just shoot up as much money. They will fire whoever they want. They will do whatever they want in order to get themselves more money. Not for anyone else, mind you. Not for the people working under them, no. There are a few good people, and they're mostly running private businesses because, you know, publicly owned businesses do, usually... It's the reason you've seen the uproar in... First it was crypto, then we had the metaverse, then AI, where they're just trying to shove that stuff in order to somehow make more money off of it, which is... It's so frustrating. As someone who see all this BS... It's so frustrating when they're just like, no, we need more, and so we saturated the market. The problem is, when you saturate the market, people get tired of the thing you're putting out. It's why you should be happy with the things you have, and don't try to overextend. But, what am I talking about? You guys probably don't care about this bit from me.
dollars isn't enough when you could be making more millions of dollars. Even as the Avengers were becoming one of the most successful media franchises
really were.
of literally
It's
all
kind of
time,
crazy.
there were other parts of the Marvel Universe that could not be used in the same way.
Yep.
Years prior, before anyone
The
had any idea
X-Men.
of what the MCU would achieve, the company had sold the movie rights to several of its most popular characters.
Now, some people don't like some of these old movies nowadays, saying some are cheesy, but I still like them. Question, do you guys like these old movies? Because I still like them, and on occasion, well, if I get the chance to watch them, I still have a huge backlog.
And those agreements were still in place.
Like,
a couple of these
Can I
characters...
just say, I think the two characters that we had play Magneto and Professor X, or the two actors, were perfect for the roles. Like, absolutely perfect. Would you guys agree with that? I don't remember their names off the top of my head because I can't remember actors to save my life. But, yeah.
persisted fine. Spider-Man, for example, never took any major hits from this situation
Because he's Spider-Man.
To put it bluntly, turning off the money printer that is Peter Parker would cause Marvel's entire business model to collapse.
Oh,
But
yeah.
the Fantastic Four and the X-Men were not
Maybe
so
that's why
lucky.
they always make him
They
suffer.
never disappeared from the comics entirely.
But they gotta
there was enough
decrease.
integrity among the creatives of Marvel to keep that from happening. But the early
Good.
2010s were definitely a time when they mattered less. Usually they would have their
Yeah.
own solo series, but then when they mattered to other things, it would be one or two characters going and hanging out with other teams. The man almost single-handedly responsible for this bitterness was a guy named Ike Perlmutter.
We
Ike
mentioned
joined
him
Marvel
before.
in 1993 and bounced around to a couple high-ranking executive positions before eventually landing as the CEO of Marvel Comics in January 2005. Perlmutter was, by
Perlmutter is all inclusive.
all accounts, an unpleasant man, to say the least.
Is also a somewhat reclusive man, and not many public photos of him exist. Plus, the following stories are all verbal, so there's not a lot of cohesion or pictures of this part of the video. But you get to that later. Okay, so yeah, I don't understand the bitterness that could come off of a man because of you can't use the characters that you want to, but I don't know why he thought the Inhumans would have such a staying power. Like, I don't really... I guess it was just bitterness that thought that he could pull through with the Inhumans.
His employees didn't like him, and maybe more surprisingly, even fellow executives hated the guy.
Wow, that
Perlmutter
says a
has clashed
lot.
famously with both Kevin Feige and even Bob Iger, CEO of Disney,
Wow.
who has owned Marvel since 2009. The reason
2009
for the
is a
almost
crazy time.
universal dislike of Ike is pretty straightforward. Imagine for a moment a kid's cartoon in which the primary bad guy is a mean, greedy, evil CEO. Congratulations, that villain you've just imagined is a pretty good approximation of Ike Perlmutter. However bad you think he is, he's probably cartoonishly worse. There are reports that Ike Perlmutter told employees of Marvel at their major New York City headquarters that they should bring their own toilet paper to the office so that the company could save on costs.
What?
He limited the entire office to 1 pot of coffee per day for
Oh
everybody.
my God.
He would go through garbage cans to fish out used Post-it notes.
Ew.
He had a personal bodyguard that was apparently so scary, people referred to the man as Perlmutter's enforcer.
What
which
the
in
hell,
and of itself
man?
is not technically a bad thing, I guess, but it really contributes to the cartoon supervillain angle.
Why would a man need... Here's the thing. Why would you need a bodyguard unless you know that you are making people angry enough to maybe punch you? Like, am I wrong in thinking that? Like, what other reasons would you need a bodyguard for unless you know how much you are disliked?
And, of course, his generally awful business policies did not end at office management. Perlmutter hated the fact that Marvel could not use some of their historically most popular characters.
A full text score is now about the cancellation of my... A result of Disney's higher single stockholder and Marvel CEO Isaac Perlmutter anger with the Fox studio over negotiating regarding the film and related rights to the Fantastic Four. The Marvel has canceled the Fantastic Four rather than provide any promotion, however small it might be, towards the... Just because so they couldn't do anything with it. So that they would probably try and rake the rights back. If the icons were scrapped, even the Fantastic Four poster in the office were pulled down, lest Perlmutter see one and have his ire raised. Wow, that level of pettiness is absolutely insane. God damn.
In their successful movies, to such an extent that he apparently stripped Fantastic Four art from the Marvel offices and actively canceled several Fantastic Four and X-Men comics. Like I said, the teams never vanished entirely, but we do know for a fact that Perlmutter specifically limited their presence. So he was a bad boss and didn't really like or understand the industry that he was working in.
Which is a hell of a thing.
But it's maybe not the level of real-world drama that I have promised in this video. Well, if you didn't have enough reason to dislike Perlmutter already, the man is also extremely racist.
Oh!
Now, accusing somebody of racism, especially as openly as I just did, is a very heavy thing.
Yes.
And I am someone who tries to present information ethically, even at my relatively low stakes.
Okay, give me the deets.
So trust me when I say, I wouldn't call Perlmutter racist if I didn't have some pretty good things I could point to.
All right.
We're going to start at the beginning, though. Perlmutter has been on the receiving end of these kind of accusations for many years, with one of the most egregious examples coming in the earliest days of the MCU. Remember how in the first Iron Man movie, Rhodey was played by a different guy? Terrence Howard played him in the first one, and then he was replaced by Don Cheadle going forward.
Yeah, I know.
The actual reason for the recast is very well documented.
A quick series of events being tangent to the video, but I didn't know that the main But we do know that the main issue was money. Howard claimed he was promised more than Marvel offered him for Iron Man 2, which may or may not be true. At the end of the day, we know Howard declined whatever Marvel offered and was recast, which for this video is enough.
Howard apparently wanted a gigantic raise to come back, and this was in the days before the massive power of the MCU had been established.
Yeah, when they
so
didn't have a
Marvel
lot of
said
money.
no and brought in Don Cheadle. End of story. Everything there is relatively normal.
Okay.
In response to this situation, Perlmutter was not very worried and said, quote, I cannot make it clear enough that I am quoting the man here. Nobody would notice the change because all black people look the same.
Oh my god. Yeah, he's racist. What the fuck? Like, what the fuck? I know I don't usually cuss in these, like, sort of superhero videos, but it just comes out of me sometimes when you hear, like, real world stuff that just makes you have to cuss out loud. Know what I mean? I'm sure some of you know what I mean.
So that's coming in pretty hot, and it is not the only case of this. Perlmutter has many allegations of similar statements to his name. But the keyword there is allegations. These are stories, secondhand accounts, and Perlmutter himself has denied them. So I'm going to be kind to the man, far kinder than he deserves, and dismiss these as mere allegations. Why on earth, you might ask, would I be so nice and dismiss these accounts?
Because we have real accounts.
It's because I don't actually need them to make my point.
Oh.
Black Panther. Good movie. Successful movie.
I've never seen it, so I wouldn't know.
19th highest grossing movie of all time.
19th, huh?
Like Perlmutter,
That's crazy.
hated Black Panther and tried to stop it from actually getting produced.
Why?
This is out of the realm of allegation and speculation. It is a well-documented thing that Mr. Perlmutter fought tooth and nail to keep Black Panther from happening.
Why? What could be the act? Well, he's racist. What am I talking about? Of course we know the reason.
Exactly what Perlmutter did to halt Black Panther, but we know he did something. Actually, a couple of things, to such an extent that eventually Bob Iger, his boss, made a personal call.
I recall this because Vincel was one telling the press around.
To the CEO of Marvel, demanding that he stop, quote, putting up roadblocks in their production schedule. What that could mean, I'm not sure, but we know the guy.
Roadblocks can be a bunch of different things, honestly, that you can put up in order to stop it, like constant reshoots or something, but yeah.
I was involved. Now, Black Panther was not the only film that Perlmutter was putting roadblocks in front of. He also fought against both Captain Marvel and Black Widow. Marvel Studios' earliest movies with female leads. And we know why he didn't want these. He thought that every superhero movie with a female star would fail. As he said, openly in leaked emails from the company.
Wow.
This is also a problem, of course, but we're going to focus more on the Black Panther situation because that's the one that would end up blowing up in Perlmutter's face.
Okay.
As you can guess, when news of the man's resistance to the movie got out to the public, it didn't take fans long to put the puzzle pieces together. You have the MCU's first movie with a black lead, and Marvel's CEO with a ton of racism accusations against him. People quickly, very quickly, started claiming that Perlmutter's resistance to the movie was due to racism. I'm not going to call this jumping to conclusions, more just looking at two pieces of information that happened to fit really well together. And eventually, this whole thing got so big that Perlmutter needed to make a public statement.
And the
statement that he made was as follows.
Okay.
Perlmutter said that his resistance to Black Panther was, quote, not because he was racist, but because it had never been done before, and its success was not guaranteed.
You could say the same thing about all of Marvel itself. No one had done something as big, and yet it was super successful. Like, no one had done something like this where all the movies were connected in some sort of way and been this successful. Am I wrong? Like, I can't think of anything that comes close to Marvel in the way they do things.
Let's pause the story right here, actually. Put a pin in that, and let's go on a journey together back to a bygone era called the 1990s.
Okay.
During the 90s, Marvel was doing pretty bad, despite the large amount of nostalgia that a lot of people have for the time now.
Yeah, they do have a lot of nostalgia. I think a lot of the designs are cool, but I heard the stories were pretty bad, so.
This decade was horrible for the comic book space. The 90s genuinely almost killed the industry entirely. This was due to a bunch of reasons, one big one being the rise of the speculator market, which is when a bunch of finance bros started looking at comic books as an investment opportunity rather than a genuine hobby. It's a whole thing. It spiraled into a lot of problems. That's neither here nor there. The point is that Marvel was doing bad to the point of near bankruptcy.
Yeah, I know this bit.
As Marvel neared disaster, they started doing a bunch of random things, really. Their clock was ticking, so they started throwing a bunch of crazy, fun projects at the wall to see if any of them stuck.
Yeah.
And one in particular did.
What?
This project was a
What was
movie.
it?
Some of you already know what
Iron
movie I'm
Man.
talking about and
Or
are
is it the
probably
Hulk?
already laughing at this, but for anyone who doesn't, I'm going to save the name of the movie for dramatic
Iron
effects, so
Man.
bear with me for a second
Iron
here.
Man.
Marvel sold a tiny bit of their movie rights to an interested party, not thinking that much would come of it, but at this point, what was the harm?
It's either Iron Man or it's
It turned out
Hulk.
that there was no harm at all. In fact, quite the opposite, as the movie would go on to be a massively unprecedented success. The movie was great. It was fun. It was interesting. It was unique. It was
That's
creative
Iron Man.
to such levels that it has
He's going over the
remained a
same points
relevant
that
part
I
of pop
kinda.
culture to this day. Now, this one movie on its own did not save Marvel from financial ruin.
Of course
Their
not.
deal with the rights did not see them getting a lot of the profits from it, but it benefited them in other very important ways. What this movie actually did was restore Hollywood's faith in Marvel Comics properties. Studio executives saw what had happened with this one, their eyes turned into cartoon dollar signs, and they immediately started trying to get a piece of that money for themselves. From this, Marvel got the chance to sell other parts of their movie rights, like the X-Men
Yes,
and Spider-Man,
Spider-Man.
and these
Oh, wait, that
would
was
be
the
the
Hulk.
deals that did save the company monetarily. So, what movie am I talking about? What singular
Is it Iron
project
Man?
was successful
Or the Hulk?
enough
It's
to
Iron Man or
raise
the
Marvel's
Hulk?
reputation and pull them at the last possible second from the jaws of bankruptcy? Well, the film in question was Blade.
Oh!
Blade.
Oh! I forgot Blade was back then! Oh my god, I completely forgot about Blade. How did I forget about Blade? Oh my god, I feel secondhand embarrassment. For those who don't know, I actually really like Blade. I forgot Blade was... I forgot. Oh my god. I totally, completely forgot Blade came out before everyone else. Like, Wesley Snipes was perfect as Blade. I don't think I'm gonna get any, like, anyone saying against that, because he was perfect as Blade. There is literally no disagreement on this. But, yeah. And I'm a big fan of Blade. You know why? As a little tiny wolf, I had a huge fear of vampires, and it was partially due to the Blade movie, partially, but also that's why I loved Blade as a kid, because he killed the vampires. Who wouldn't like a vampire hunter as a kid when you're afraid of vampires? It's also why I kind of like Van Helsing, but yeah. The power of a moral, the soul of a human, the heart of a hero. Yeah.
Is the movie commonly credited with kickstarting Marvel's rise to newfound success. So like Perlmutter's a
forgot.
liar,
I feel embarrassed.
Perlmutter's response to his racism accusations being that he didn't like Black Panther because it had never been done before is indefensibly bad.
Yeah.
For a moment,
It
let's
had
do
been.
a thought experiment and give him the
love Blade.
absolute most benefit of the doubt we possibly can and say that there are no racial motivations behind this and he was being entirely honest. And what would that look like? Maybe Perlmutter's resistance to Black Panther
But it was still
from
being
a
made, so it was always gonna
business
be released.
perspective. After all, Black Panther was very different than a lot of other superhero movies. It had a distinct tone and a distinct visual aesthetic,
That is true.
and its main character had never been adapted from page to screen in this way before. Black Panther could be considered a risk due to those factors. You know, like Blade,
Yeah.
you can't even make the argument...
Blade was a dark sort of series because, well, it was the 90s at the time, but he worked perfectly with it because it's Blade, the vampire hunter. He goes around shooting and stabbing vampires and cutting them in half, so he works just fine. Also, he has a sort of parallel or parody in Venture Bros called Jefferson Twilight, who is also a very cool and rad dude. He's obviously not exactly the same, but he is also a very cool dude.
that Perlmutter somehow didn't know what was going on with Blade in the late 90s? Because the dude joined Marvel in 1993. He was there when all of this was going down.
I
so
see.
trying to claim that Black Panther was a risk because it was something new and innovative, come on, dude, that is nothing. I know I'm really hammering this point home, but I like doing that because I like pointing out how ridiculous it is.
It honestly
you don't even
is.
have to
You're
go
not
back
wrong.
as far as Blade to showcase how awful
In
of
the
a
Guardians of the
response
Galaxy,
this
he's
is,
completely
because
right.
Marvel Studios already had a reputation of doing things.
No one knew about the Guardians of the Galaxy till this point, till James Gunn did a thing with it and changed it up. Like, I'm not saying that the old Guardians of the Galaxy was bad, but this is a completely different change that opened up them to a whole new audience. I didn't know they existed. My friends probably did, because they know more about this stuff, but yeah.
Had never been done before to great success. Guardians of the Galaxy especially proved that audiences liked it when Marvel got weird. And just to throw one more flaming bag of poop onto this dumpster fire, this was an official
Not because they...
statement,
Okay,
not
already
even
did that
given
again.
by Perlmutter
What?
himself, but communicated from Perlmutter to
Oh.
the public by the man's attorney.
Oh.
This was stated by Perlmutter's
couldn't even
lawyer.
say it
It wasn't like
himself.
he said anything
Wow.
offhand in an interview. This was a coordinated, pre-written response. And that's what he decided to go with. So yeah, he's racist. I'll say it.
Yeah.
So,
Glad he's
why
gone.
did I tell you all that? I mean, it's an interesting story to be
'Cause we're
sure,
going to
but
go
this video
into-
is supposed to be about the Inhumans. Let me call back to something I said before the Perlmutter being horrible tangent, which is that in the early 2010s, Marvel at the corporate level was very bitter at some of their characters, the X-Men included. Perlmutter in particular hated the X-Men as much as some of their villains do. If he
Which
had
is
his
crazy.
way, he would have scrubbed
Classic X-Men writer Chris Claremont has confirmed that Perlmutter did ban the creation of new X-Men characters for a time, and he didn't want them to use by far. Dude, really? That's such a dumb reason.
mutants from the pages of everything that Marvel was releasing.
love
But he didn't
the
have
X-Men
his way,
accounts.
and that meant he had to be tactical about it. Perlmutter could not just get rid of the
Yeah.
X-Men. That would not have been received well.
Of course not.
But what he could do was replace them. He could
He
get those
tried.
stupid comic book readers to like the new characters that he wanted. They'd forget all about the X-Men when they saw Marvel's newest rising stars, the Inhumans. Now, far
This is
be
where
it
that's
from
been.
me to assume...
See, I thought it was mainly Disney that was doing this because they had known the rights, but no, it was specifically a man within Marvel doing this. This is like the time when they do, it's hard to like phrase the sort of thing that could be compared to this with how dumb this is.
why Ike Perlmutter loved the Inhumans so much. For all
Why?
I know, he could have been one of their few but dedicated fans, reading all the Inhumans
I
comics
kinda
for
doubt it.
decades and enjoying
He seems
himself
like a
all
suit.
the way. I will mention, though, that Ike Perlmutter historically has shown no care or interest in Marvel as a storytelling platform or
Of
any
course
of their
not.
characters or world building within. He only cares about them for the money, like the greedy, soulless, withered husk of a man that he is.
Yes.
I will also bring up a point that I am certainly not making any claims about myself on a personal level, but mention purely as a topic that is often brought up by fans when this discussion arises. Perlmutter tried to replace the X-Men, classically used as stories of diversity and minority discrimination, with the Inhumans, who have always had eugenics baked into their core concept. Something to think about. Again, I'm not making any claims, but other people have, which
I'm
you
not
can
sure
mull
if he
over in
would,
your own time.
if that was the
Getting
reason
back
out,
on the
because he
direct-
probably doesn't know enough about comics to know anything, let's be honest here. Like I said, he's a suit,
Next
so
topic.
I'm not sure.
What did this replacement effort
I
actually
do still think he's obviously a racist, but I don't...
look like? Now we get to start talking about the comics and storylines themselves again. The big push began in 2013. In an Avengers comic this year, Attilan returned from space and was positioned as a kind of floating island above New York City.
Okay, weird.
Presumably just as a way to get
That seems like a
Inhumans
terrible
back
idea.
on Earth and nearby other characters. things would really kick off
The
in
Infinity
issue
part
3
of
of an
third?
event comic called Infinity by Jonathan Hickman. Now, this book is great. Jonathan Hickman is one of my favorite writers at Marvel. This
Don't know
is a
him.
really cool story, and I would recommend it. The only sin of Infinity is containing the inciting incident for the Inhumans push.
Okay.
One of the main plot points of Infinity is that Thanos and his
Took away his
henchmen have
mind.
attacked Earth in a hunt for Thanos' lost child.
Oh yeah, I know about this thing. Thanos. I watched Alex land video that involved him, or what? Alex, I can't pronounce words today for some reason.
Apparently, Thanos had a kid with an Inhuman woman many years ago, and now he's returned to the planet so that he can kill his heir, which is something that Thanos would do.
Yeah.
We'll talk a bit about Thanos' kid in a bit, but what matters for this point in the story is that the villain's quest leads him into a fight with Black Bolt. This causes Black Bolt to do what is historically cited as one of the dumbest things the character has
Did he
ever
shout?
done. Detonating a Terrigen
Oh,
bomb.
this bit.
He
Why?
did this purely willingly. It was
forgot
set up
to-
at first like he was
I forgot to mention this, but add the contain all the Terrigen the sea had. So, what? That's an incredibly stupid decision. What? What? Why?
detonating it as a last-ditch effort to stop Thanos, but then in the final pages of the event, Black Bolt is talking to Maximus, and Maximus confirms that apparently Black Bolt was going to detonate the bomb whether Thanos was there or not, and the alien tyrant
Why?
was just a good cover for him to do that. At this point,
That's
I do want to
stupid.
take a
Why?
very quick and I think very well-deserved sidebar. Over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to be hating on a lot of comics pretty openly. And I want
Okay.
to make it crystal
That's
clear
fine.
that none of this hate is directed at the writers or creatives involved.
That's
a lot of
understandable.
very good writers whom I like a lot were involved in this new Inhumans initiative, and the problems present in these books are not patterns consistent with the rest of their work. So I'm going to assume, especially with evidence from people like Perlmutter, that all of these problems were caused by corporate and editorial mandate. The writers are cool, no hate to you guys. Now, back to those problems. The detonation of the Terrigen bomb released
cloud.
2 gigantic clouds of Terrigen mist. These clouds then
Know this
began
bit.
just kind of sweeping around the planet, not dissipating due to whatever chemical properties are present in Terrigen, and just moving around like a weather pattern with the Earth's wind currents.
Kind of terrifying.
This might not sound like a huge issue at first, because Terrigen doesn't do anything to regular humans. It has no
But-
effects, positive or negative. Terrigen only gives powers to people
Seen
who are
videos of
descendants
Inhumans emerging
of
from
the
their
original
cocoons.
Kree experiments. Except,
Do they not always
remember,
have the
I
cocoons?
said a while ago that controversy over Terrigen in Atalan's past caused the Inhumans to spread out all over the world.
Yeah.
That was something that was really expanded upon in this era of comics. This teeny little change to the world building meant that the Inhumans were no longer contained to their secret civilizations
Yeah.
like they had been for pretty much all of their history up to this point. Instead, there were people all over the globe living their regular lives without ever knowing that somewhere in their history they had an Inhuman ancestor.
Yeah.
If you were one of those people and the Terrigen cloud swept through your town, Terrigenesis would happen.
Whether
Meaning
you
that all
want
over
to
the
or
planet,
not.
people started going into cocoons and popping
Or
out
not
with randomized superpowers.
Yeah.
These people, called New Humans, capital
New
N,
hu-
lowercase u,
Okay. I'll take it. You know what? I'll take
capital
it.
Humans, which I always thought was dumb, were the focus of an immediate follow-up series to Infinity, simply called Inhuman. Inhuman mostly focused on the royal family and a select group of people from other Inhuman settlements as they dealt with the fallout of the Terrigen clouds. People were now
Okay.
gaining superpowers all over the world,
Randomly.
and the royals,
Kind
as
of
kings
like
of the human civilization,
mutants.
felt that it was their responsibility to find these people and help guide them as these transformations struck their bodies, which is a very cool story, and
Yeah.
also almost shot for shot what X-Men is.
Yeah.
Mutants
Yeah.
and Inhumans have
Quite literally,
always
like I
had-
said, it's almost exactly what the X-Men do, you know, going around helping mutants deal with their problems, deal with the fact of, you know, other such things.
Parallels, as I addressed earlier, which is probably one reason why Perlmutter incorrectly thought they were interchangeable in the eyes of comic readers.
Probably,
but
yeah.
in this status quo, Inhumans were basically just mutants in a different font. People were gaining transforming superpowers randomly, and the Royals took the place of Charles Xavier, guiding those people into their new lives. Inhuman ran for 14 issues, and it was fine, I guess, but it was not subtle in the slightest. Marvel openly advertised this comic as the beginning of a new era, with at least one marketing solicitation straight up saying, get in at the ground floor of the next big Marvel franchise.
Oh my god.
Fans immediately picked up on what was going on, and
Oh,
it would
yeah.
get even less subtle about a year in.
Let me guess,
After
with
all,
the
if
Terrigen
Marvel
Mist
was
killing
pushing
mutants?
the Inhumans as the next big thing, they weren't going to stop at one comic. And so in 2015, Inhuman ended and was replaced by 2 series running concurrently.
And that
the
is?
first of them was called All New Inhumans, and the second one was called Uncanny Inhumans.
Oh my god.
Meaning that Marvel was just kind of
Almost
spitting
just,
in X-Men
you know,
fans' faces.
Yeah.
For anyone who's not
There's
really
one singer comments in the 70s that was called the Inhumans the most uncanny heroes of all, but actually was never used for them again after. I mean, it's most attributed to the X-Men, which, as you guys know, I love the X-Men, so yeah.
Well-versed in comic book publication, it is very common for popular superheroes to have adjectives associated with them. Think like the Incredible
the
Hulk
Amazing
or the
is
Amazing Spider-Man.
They always
sometimes
had
Spectacular
adjectives.
Spider-Man. Characters get signature descriptors.
Yeah.
And Uncanny was
The
always
Invincible
an
Iron
X-Men
Man.
thing. Uncanny X-Men was a recognizable name to such an extent
The
that if you
Invincible
saw
Iron Man.
Uncanny on another book,
I mean, usually
you could
means
assume
X-Men
that
were
the
there.
X-Men were going to be involved. This convinced any remaining doubtful fans that this was, in fact, a full-on replacement effort by Marvel,
Why
and
is
it was not
Kang
well
here?
received by anybody.
Well, of course
X-Men
not.
and mutant
No
fans
one-
did not like that their characters were getting sidelined, and
Well, no one likes it when their characters get pushed away for someone else. It's why when people were trying to do successor stuff, most people were pushing against it. And while some of them did get better, like everyone I think likes Miles Morales, I think he's a nice character. Well, I can't think of a better word than nice right now, but I think he's a well-developed character. There, I said something. I'm an idiot.
even the few Inhumans fans didn't like that their cult favorites were getting forced into a different role.
Well, yeah,
I wanted
they
to
were.
find some authentic reaction.
And yes, the beast that you were seeing in covers was Marvel just kind of shoving him in there, made him a buddy with it.
This.
Why?
So I dug up a Reddit post from 10
I don't
years
even
ago
think he
asking
knows them
what
all that
people
well.
thought about Uncanny Inhumans a few issues into its run, and Reddit
And-
user Shincole summarized it pretty well,
Isn't odd.
saying
This is
the
just-
odd characters and their stories aren't actually their gripe. It isn't odd. These
just
days
the
it's
X-Men.
Just X-Men and mutant themes with a twist and a royal family. It's
Yeah.
absolutely boring compared with what the Inhumans used to be.
It's-
User Chicken in a Suit responded to them saying, "Yup, give me something exciting on the same level as War of Kings, which was one of the Inhuman space arcs from a few years prior, and you'll get my attention. Nowadays,
Okay.
I'm just not interested. Unless it's Karnak.
Unless it's Karnak.
Of them.
Okay.
There's a lot of comments on this post and a lot
Travers.
of similar posts out there, and they all read pretty much the same. People did not hate the Inhumans during
But
these
they
early
weren't meant
years of
for
the
this.
initiative. They just didn't really like them. The stories were
Didn't
kind
really
of flat,
like them is
and
still
were such
pretty
an
bad.
obvious X-Men replacement that it left a bad taste in people.
I will say this, when it comes to comics or any form of media, the worst thing you can do isn't anger. It's meh. Just getting nothing as a response. Getting like, it's boring. That is literally the worst thing that you can get, in my honest opinion.
People's mouths. The books were not entirely misses. The first arc of Uncanny Inhumans dealt with the son of Black Bolt and Medusa, Ahura Boltagon, and that one is well received.
Oh.
They also brought back some original elements from Inhumans,
Such
most
as?
interestingly, taking Johnny Storm and reuniting him with his
Oh.
classic love interest, Medusa.
What?
Wait,
what? Wait, what?
Yeah, Uncanny Inhumans had Human Torch on the roster,
Why?
and he was in a relationship with Medusa,
Why?
who had broken up with Black Bolt after the whole Terrigen bomb thing.
Okay,
to be very
but
clear,
still weird.
Crystal was around during this era. She was not dead
No, I
or
couldn't
anything.
even blame you. I know you can't. I can't even blame Johnny. He's like a kid, but you're my sister. Yeah, what the fuck?
She was present, and it is an active plot point that Johnny has moved on from the character who was literally written to be his love interest and is now with her older sister.
Yeah,
And now, look,
very
I
weird.
understand that in comic books, characters are going to age at different rates. That's just
They
sort
do
of
all
the
the time.
nature of the medium. Whoever is more important is often going to grow up faster than characters who don't get as many appearances.
Yeah, it's
But
kind
you
of
don't
weird.
often get to, like, see that comparison directly because you don't have one person dating two sisters.
Yeah.
And in the case of Crystal and Medusa and Human Torch, Johnny was supposed to be like 16 or 17.
Oh, wait,
in
this
the
gets even
original
weirder and
Fantastic Four
grosser.
series when the Inhumans started appearing, and
yeah,
Medusa was a full-grown woman. So while they are both adults in modern canon, it still feels weird.
Yeah.
People hated this, which I probably don't even have to openly say to you guys. I don't think there was a single fan of Marvel who, in the years before this, was thinking, man, I wish Johnny Storm would get together with his ex's older sister. But that is the direction Marvel decided to go.
choose to skip to Civil War 2 in this video because Paul would have been too much of an off-topic tangent. But Inhumans, sorry, New Humans was the incurring effect. Yeah, I know about this bit, actually. It was, Civil War 2 is just weird. Like, I know quite a bit about this one where there's a new human that has the possibility to say that it could see into the future, so they're basically trying to do the evil police thing of trying to monitor people's thoughts and attack them before they can possibly do anything bad, but he was actually just seeing into different multiverses or whatnot, and, you know, Iron Man's just basically trying to stop her from doing that, which is, yeah. Like, she tries to kill Miles Morales, which I am like, why? He is a good person. You just saw the possibility of him killing Captain America. It's not like Miles isn't the type of... You see how frustrated I get with some of this stuff?
And this and a
This
bunch
video's
of
gonna
similar
be really
decisions
long.
contributed to this Inhumans initiative just kind of getting worse and worse as it went along. Despite all of this, there were some good things that arose out of this initiative, with probably the biggest one being Miss Marvel. Kamala Khan debuted in 2014
she was
as one of the
Inhuman here.
earliest
I got so
Inhumans
frustrated I
from
forgot
the new
about her.
push. She has Inhuman genetics, she got her abilities when the Terrigen Clouds swept through New Jersey,
That
and
is
she
no
has gone
longer
on
a
to be an
thing.
extremely popular character pretty consistently since. Though, perhaps a better word for Miss Marvel's situation in particular is that she arose as a popular character in spite of the Inhumans initiative, because she was not originally supposed to be an Inhuman at all. The original concept that her creators brought to Marvel,
but they aren't
featured
allowed
her
to make
as
new
a mutant.
X-Men.
Marvel liked Kamala Khan a lot, evidently enough to publish her with her own solo series, which
That
was
I do
the
know.
call Miss Marvel's
Someone
a
in Marvel
fantastic
liked her
character.
a lot, who I think was her
Marvel
original
was not
character.
making new mutant characters like this at the time,
Of course
due
not.
to
So
mandates
we got-
from people like Ike Perlmutter.
Yeah,
And
so
while
they
Miss
couldn't
Marvel
just
got
make
her
her
own
a
book,
mutant.
editorial insisted that her origin be switched around to make her part of the new Inhumans push. That actually makes for a great transition into talking about Perlmutter specifically again for a bit. Remember, all of his bitterness and hatred was ostensibly due to movies, and maybe some own personal beliefs, but I'm not going to comment on that, as I've said a couple of times.
Yeah.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe was his main
Well, you
point
technically
of
did
concern,
comment, but
and
you
his
know.
end goal was to put the Inhumans in there.
Yeah.
Some of you who have followed the Marvel Cinematic Universe
Did that ever
for
become a
while
thing?
may remember that
Like, it
an
had a show,
Inhumans
right?
movie was announced in 2014.
Oh, yeah, it was. Does anyone remember that?
Apparently having started early development 3 years prior in 2011. This was due to
It was supposed to be
Perlmutter.
after-
It is commonly believed that the inclusion of the Inhumans in the movie schedule was one of the reasons that he caved on letting Black Panther go through. There is no evidence to this directly, but I've seen it brought up enough that I did want to mention
knew that they were
it
trying
at
to make a
least
show
quickly.
or something,
A
but I
bit
don't
of
think...
connected cinematic setup began moving for Inhumans fairly quick
Wasn't it
after
the-
that, with the Agents of
Kree?
S.H.I.E.L.D. show including Inhuman characters
Yeah.
as a major part of the storyline.
Oh,
for a
I didn't
couple
know
of
this.
their seasons.
I've only saw a few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so, you know. And the majority of Inhuman cast from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, although not all of them were original characters,
For
not
movie
from the...
itself,
Oh!
it was first announced
Okay.
to be releasing in 2018. Then it was delayed to 2019, and then it was removed from the release schedule altogether.
Yeah.
The changes regarding the movie happened, of course, due to Ike Perlmutter. Though this time, it's not because of something unfortunate that Perlmutter did, it's because of something unfortunate happening to him. Hooray!
What?
Due to the incredible success that the MCU had already achieved, in 2015, Marvel Studios was kind of split off from the rest of Marvel Entertainment. It didn't become an entirely separate company, but under the new structure, Marvel Studios operated more independently and reported directly to Disney rather than reporting to
that was
Marvel
the restructuring
Entertainment.
bit. I didn't know about
the
any of
rest
this. Yeah.
Kevin Feige ended up as the head of Marvel Studios, and Ike Perlmutter, largely due to his general unpopularity, remained at Marvel Entertainment, still having power over the company, but not over any of their movies. And then shortly after this, they made Black Panther and Black Widow and Captain Marvel and all the stuff.
So they did all the stuff just right in there.
This is great. Ike Perlmutter losing control over things is always good. But the key word in that is movies. Back in this stage,
that's
Marvel
how we got that
Studios only
TV
did
show.
the movies, and Marvel Television was a different branch. That was still under Marvel Entertainment, and by extension, still under Perlmutter. Inhumans was dead at Marvel Studios. Kevin Feige and Perlmutter hated each other. Feige was never on board with the Inhumans, so the second he had authority to cancel the thing, he did.
Of course.
But it found new life elsewhere. Thus, in 2017, Marvel released Inhumans the Show. Technically,
so I like he's using Circuit's music for the background. Yeah, I heard about this. I heard it got canceled to me.
The MCU, but more of a spin-off of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. than anything else. And that whole sphere was decanonized from the main Marvel Cinematic Universe over the coming years. Some people might try to fight me on that. I'm sorry, it's true. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is no longer canon. Maybe in a multiverse thing, but not to the main stuff.
I don't really
the
care.
show was built on the rubble, essentially, of Inhumans, the movie. Perlmutter had kind of been poking production of that along for many years, and so there was enough in development that it could be converted into a new form. It was bad. I briefly considered doing like a fake out moment where I said it was great and then did like a twist joke thing. No, I can't even make myself to do that. Guys, Inhumans is so, it's so awful.
I wonder.
The plot of the show revolves around the Inhuman royal family being exiled from Attilan by Maximus after he takes the place over, and then they have to fight their way back and stop him. It is relatively similar to their first appearance.
They look kind of like the
Fantastic
X-Men in their
Four,
first movie.
But don't make the mistake of thinking that this show cared about its source material. They tried to make Maximus a sympathetic character, which did not play at all. Medusa's hair gets cut off in episode 1.
Why? That's her
because
main
it was
thing.
too expensive to animate, and this show was running on a shoestring budget. The funniest and maybe most egregious example of Inhumans just spitting on the source material is a scene where Karnak is trying to scale a cliff face, and he steps on a loose rock and falls.
What?
Karnak, the guy whose
the guy who's basically a super monk from, you know, the things they talk about to the Tibetan monks, is falling.
Weaknesses in objects, steps on a loose rock and falls. The one thing he should not be doing.
Yeah.
The show was not well liked, obviously. Inhumans got an 8-episode first season, which was met with universally negative reviews, and then it was promptly canceled, after which it has not been referenced since. Outside of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse
I know this
of
bit,
Madness, which had a presumably different variant of Black Bolt, but one played by Anson Mount, who also played the character in the show. And in that movie, he gets murdered, which is quite funny, actually.
Isn't he immune to his own powers, though?
Let's return to the comics, which is where things are really going to heat up. Yes, this heats up even farther than where we've already been, and by orders of magnitude. I can't say exactly why the storyline that I'm about to talk about happened, but I have my suspicions that it was due to Ike Perlmutter being bitter about his ousting from Marvel Studios, and taking it out even more on the comics side of the business.
Of course.
We're going to rewind time just a
I'm
little
guessing we're
bit
going
from
with
the
the
live-action
Terrigen thing
show
that kills
to
mutants.
November of 2016. At this point in the comics, the two gigantic Terrigen clouds that had been floating around the planet were still just there because that was the way that Marvel was making new Inhumans characters. They had just been on a cycle transforming people, and no one had really done anything about it. But that was about to change. Even though Inhuman society was kind of mad at Black Bolt for releasing the Terrigen, most of them began to view the clouds with a sort of religious reverence. After all, it was a huge part of their culture throughout their entire history.
That is
and now
true.
their culture was just floating around the planet as literally a big force in the sky. I could see how a religion would form out of that.
Yeah.
And then the X-Men blew one of the clouds up. Emma Frost discovered a mutant named Alchemy who could change chemicals into other chemicals or something like that, and with his abilities, they transmuted an entire cloud into something else, presumably just something natural for the atmosphere.
Okay.
Now, why on earth would they do that? Why would the mutants destroy something with religious significance to an entire civilization?
Because it was killing them.
Well, there was one tiny little detail. Terrigen kills mutants.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, just a minor little
God.
thing. Terrigen does not do anything to people with purely human genetics.
But mutants
if
are
somebody
everywhere.
With an X gene breathes in Terrigen,
Yeah,
it
the
gives
X
them
gene
a fatal
isn't-
disease called Mpox. And with a cloud of it just kind of sweeping around the planet, anyone caught in the cloud who had mutant genes would die. Not that big of a deal, right?
I wonder where Sunfire
Cue
is.
the
He's
2016
one of my favorites.
crossover event, Inhumans versus X-Men. One Terrigen cloud has been destroyed, and now the mutants are gunning for the other one, so the Inhumans are going to stop them. They have one source of Terrigen left on the planet, and they are not going to let it be taken
Old Man
away from them
Logan.
for the simple crime of gassing minorities. Now, I know that phrase might trigger a very understandable YouTube manual review of this video's monetization, so let me just be crystal clear. That is what this book was about at its core. There was a giant cloud of green gas sweeping around the planet.
My people will not be Okay, I can understand completely why Magneto is against the Inhumans in this completely. And you all know the reason why.
Killing exclusively members
So do
of
I.
a minority group who were prominently led by a Jewish man that experienced the Holocaust, no less.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was just going to say it, but
yes, it can get worse than that. The Inhumans were represented.
Death Cloud was still active when the lion said, "Gee, I wonder why the humans were moving fast." Yes, it looks like the humans have decided to skip. Oh, I wonder why.
As the better side of this conflict.
How?
I'm not gonna go beat for beat.
They're literally dying because of your stupid cloud that you unleashed.
Issues of Inhumans versus
Steal
X-Men.
their future? What? They're literally dying to it.
Because quite frankly, I do not want to. But the comic represented the X-Men as the aggressors right from the beginning. It does end with the other Terrigen cloud being destroyed. However, the Inhumans are the ones to do it. They're the ones to step up and take responsibility for the abhorrent actions of their king. Why do they get forced into that position? Because the X-Men develop Inhuman hunting sentinels and start attacking them. This event was absolutely intended by Marvel Corporate to be the final charge in the X-Men to Inhumans replacement effort. Fans were meant to look at this and think that the mutants had gone too far and the Inhumans would be spearheading the future of the Marvel Universe from this point on. Marvel was so confident in this.
For those who don't know how to forget include, Black Bolt kills Cyclops at the start of the event. That was a big... Yeah, because he's one of the leaders of the X... Oh my god.
They even actively marketed it as a choose your side kind of deal. There were even tie-ins to this in other media. If you played Marvel's mobile games at the time, you might remember an in-game event where you could choose between either the Inhumans or the X-Men and get special faction rewards during the course of things.
Oh my god.
Comic readers were encouraged in multiple places at multiple levels to make a stand and
I
choose
wonder who
their
they
team.
chose.
Will you root for the rising stars of the Inhumans or the dated and hated X-Men?
Dated?
And fans chose X-Men.
Yeah.
Resoundingly. Yeah,
because we love the X-Men. They've been around so long, and people, like...
Humans vs. X-Men is one of the most negatively received events, maybe
Not
in
surprising.
the entire history of Marvel. Which, honestly, anyone
Young
with
Beast? Why is there Young Beast? Oh, yeah, Time Travel. Never mind. It's probably Time Travel.
half a brain for storytelling, or just the comic book industry as a whole.
I don't know half of these people, by the way. On the Inhuman side. I know most of the... Here's the funny thing. I know most of the people on the X-Men side. You know, you have Lana, X-23, who is taking up the role as Wolverine. You have Beast, Young Beast. We have Cyclops. We have Forge. We have Havoc. We got magic.
Really should have been able to tell you.
Is that the... Yeah, that's the Sanford Cuckoos.
People weren't really liking the Inhumans already going into this event, viewing them as fighting the X-Men on a publication level, which they absolutely were.
Oh yeah, they were.
And I don't know and will never know why Marvel Corporate decided that the solution to that problem was making the Inhumans not only fight the X-Men for releases, but also fight them literally in-universe.
Yeah.
The final issue of IVX released in March of 2017, and the disastrous reception of the event marked a pretty definitive end to the Inhumans initiative that Marvel had been trying to make a thing for, at this point, several years.
God
Their
damn.
level of relevance would change literally immediately after this.
I'm not
the
surprised.
following month, April 2017, a new comic called Royals was released, which starred the Inhuman royal family
They look
going into
much
space
different
and
artists.
having adventures out there, which kind of tells me that Marvel knew the writing was on the wall for IVX
Yeah.
since they were evidently prepping this in advance.
Yeah.
Royals actually is not bad, probably because it was not a blatant ripoff of X-Men and was instead a return to the Inhumans in
yeah.
their space status quo from before this whole catastrophe, which was
Good.
generally well received.
Good for them.
This was the comic that gave us the progenitors and a lot of new, interesting developments to the earliest lore and world building of the Inhumans. It ran for 12 issues, and it also helps that it was written by Al Ewing, which tracks.
Oh.
Al Ewing seems to be
Good
the
job, Al
universe's
Ewing.
creative force that exists to balance out the evil of Ike Perlmutter. Fun as Royals was, it was nowhere near enough to restore the general faith of the comic audience in the Inhumans as a concept, which is made very
Understandable.
clear by the next time that the group appeared,
Death
which
of
was
the
in a
Inhumans?
2018 miniseries called Death of the Inhumans. This comic
Yeah, they
is only
seem like
5
they're
issues,
done
and
with
we
them.
can skim over the plot of it pretty quickly, but I will just say this right up front. The title is not clickbait. The main villain of Death of the Inhumans is a weird entity known as Vox, who is originally
Vox
set up
voice.
as a Kree superweapon that can, assimilate the powers of all the Inhumans and condense them into one being.
Oh,
This
that's
would be
horrifying.
revealed as a fake-out, though.
Oh.
It turns out that Vox was actually not one singular entity,
But
and was
several.
instead the result of a conversion process that the Kree could do on their experiments.
Oh,
meaning that
horrifying.
Most Inhumans got forcibly converted into Vox clones, and at the end of the comic, Black Bolt uses his voice to kill all of the Voxes, thus eliminating most of the Inhuman population in the entire galaxy, because this included those space Inhumans too, in one fell swoop.
Wow.
With that,
Of course, the named Inhumans were never shown to be killed directly, so I come back. But Alad was slaughtered and stuff after assumed even the Inhumans were dead until they showed up again, proving they were survived, which mostly
the
did not.
Inhumans were gone, legitimately. Marvel had just taken this sphere of their universe that
And
they had tried
destroyed
so
it.
hard to make a thing and removed them from the equation almost entirely.
Which is crazy.
The royal family had survived, but were reduced to a state of almost total irrelevance. Barring a
Yeah, they
very
are, like,
recent exception,
small
which I will
group
be
of
talking
people.
about right at the end of the video, several of the royals
Why is Beta Ray Bill there?
didn't appear at all after this. Like Gorgon
Rome
and Triton
remains.
specifically, Death of the Inhumans 5 is their most recent appearance. They didn't even get cameos.
Damn.
Even more major members like Black Bolt and Medusa, yeah, they're not plot relevant. They do appear occasionally, just kind of to remind people that the Inhumans do technically still exist, but they have not been major characters.
There's one singular Inhuman to get regular appearances in Lockjaw. Not as an Inhuman, of course, but just as funny
appear as,
Superdog.
side concepts in other people's books. I think the nail in the coffin is Kamala Khan, though.
Her
Miss Marvel
transferring
has
to a
remained a
mutant?
popular character throughout all of this, but in 2024, she became a mutant.
Yeah,
There's
I know
a
this
whole
bit.
miniseries about this called Miss Marvel: The New Mutant, which establishes that
The
she
New
is
Mutant,
both
so she's
an
part of
Inhuman
the New Mutants.
and a mutant, which is a weird thing.
Yeah,
that
what?
honestly shouldn't
I thought
really
she was just, died and came back as a mutant. How does that work? You guys in the comments can tell me if you want.
work. The interaction between mutant genes and inhuman genes is something that has come up on occasion. I mentioned very briefly a while ago that there was a series called Son of M in the mid-2000s,
Yeah.
which was about Quicksilver using Terrigen to reactivate his mutant genetics. This is also what he did to his daughter, who is considered a mutant as well. Luna Maximoff
Confusing.
is still around on occasion in Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch things, and she has empathic powers. She's a fun
Empathic
character. I do like
powers?
her. Miss Marvel, though, she has fully moved spheres.
Yeah,
Technically,
like
she
she
is
was
still an
dressed up
Inhuman,
as one of the
but for all
X-Men at
intents
one
and
point.
purposes, she is a mutant character and interacts with mutant and X-Men books exclusively. I mean, not that there are Inhuman books for her to interact with, but whatever. This was a relatively unpopular decision with fans when it happened because they saw it as unnecessary MCU synergy. Miss Marvel was confirmed to be a mutant in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
That I don't know. I don't watch any
anywhere
of the
yet.
shows, really.
But as to that point, I would remind everybody that she was only an Inhuman in the first place, also due to movie synergy, and that was probably a worse example of it.
Yeah.
With the context of the story of her creation, Miss Marvel's origin
There's
change
Cyclops.
is even funnier because not only is it Marvel shifting their narrative away from
Her
the
weird
Inhumans,
tube
it
arms.
is them quite
Tube
literally undoing one of the first decisions made at the
Yeah.
company level during that initiative. Miss Marvel, the New Mutant, is basically the company saying, hey guys, we know we messed up a little bit. And while, moving
It's kind of crazy how long that push for Inhumans must have been.
away from this horrible initiative was definitely the right call, it does kind of suck because, as I've mentioned
The
several
Inhumans have
times,
mostly
the
been destroyed
creatives
due to
at
this.
Marvel were doing some
And-
good work during the Inhumans push and came
Oh.
up with some great characters. I
Really?
promised way earlier in the video that there would
Okay,
be a
tell me
section
about 'em.
on some weird Inhumans, and this is a good way to get to the end of the video
The
on
diamonds
a
in the
positive
rough.
note.
All right,
Let's
let me
really
hear
quick
about
run
these
through
cool
some
ones.
minor Inhumans who are worth talking about for good or bad reasons. I already briefly mentioned one of these, so let's begin with him.
Okay.
This is Thane, son
Yeah,
of Thanos and
this
an
dude.
unnamed Inhuman woman. We don't really know anything about Thane's mom. Oh well.
Oh well.
Thane did not live in Atalan. Instead, he lived in one of the other Inhuman settlements,
Oh, this one.
Oralan. This
Oralan.
area did not have nearly as much Terrigen as
Thane.
Atalan did,
I thought
and
his name
thus
was
members
Thanos.
of this group
Oh, well.
experienced Terrigenesis far less, leading to Thane growing to adulthood before ever experiencing the process. He did know who his
Hmm. was
dad
weird
was,
what
which
he
was a
said
pretty
of him.
big deal, but Thane did not want to follow in his father's footsteps and instead
Understandable.
dedicated his life to helping others. Thane was a doctor. He might not have had any powers of his own, but he was good at what
But
he
he was
did,
helping
and he
people,
tried
which
to
was
assist as
good.
many people in his community as he possibly could. That is, until
Until-
Black Bolt did a stupid and detonated the Terrigen bomb, and one of the clouds made its way to Oralan, forcing Terrigenesis on all of its residents, including Thane. Apparently, the mixture of Thanos' genetics, which is a whole complicated topic in and of itself,
Okay.
with
I know
Inhuman
he's an
DNA,
Eternal.
turned him into something physically resembling his
Deviant
father,
Eternal or
which
something.
understandably caused a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
Even worse than the visual connection to a conquering tyrant was the powers that Thane ended up with.
And
His
those
abilities
are?
are kind of complicated. The comics usually summarize them quickly as his left hand bringing death, while his
Oh.
right hand brings living death.
What does
The
that
powers of
mean?
the left are very simple. If Thane channels his abilities through his left hand, it kills people. The powers of the right hand are a little bit more nuanced, though, because what is living death?
Yeah.
Well, in Thane's case, it turns out to be a form of stasis. Thane's right hand can trap his victims in an amber-like substance, not killing them, but freezing them indefinitely.
Oh,
The powers
that's horrifying
are
as
strong
well.
and also difficult to control, especially in
Horrifying.
the moment right after Thane received them. After his Terrigenesis, his death ability overloaded and instantly murdered every other resident of Orlan. Which, wow, that is a pretty dark but very good story arc for a child of Thanos. The whole point
damn.
of Thane is that he tried his hardest
This
to
is where
deny
we
his
sold.
father's legacy, but then had it forced on him, at least to some
The
capacity
sins of the
anyway.
father.
This theme continues for his arc as Thanos came looking for
Very
him,
last of
and
my
not for any
offspring.
nice reasons, but because he was trying to kill all of his heirs.
Of course
Thane
it
does
was.
end up fighting Thanos shortly after this, but deals the final blow not with his left hand, but with his right, leaving his
him-
father alive and thus shaking some of that awful history. Thane then begins training to become, quote, something worse than anything Thanos could have ever dreamed, a better man than he was.
That is an
Thane is
amazing line. I'm not gonna lie.
great. I like Thane. He would get a few more arcs in the coming years, always in the cosmic sphere of things more than the Inhumans one, but
Okay.
unfortunately, he has not appeared since 2017, which sucks. I think that much like Miss Marvel, Thane does have a place in current canon if you just focus on his Thanos thing more than the Inhumans one. I hope somebody brings him back eventually. Another interesting Inhuman character from the
this one looks
unfortunate
interesting.
time of the push is Reader, who has one of the wildest powers out of this entire group, and
He
maybe
can
even
what?
in Marvel in general. Reader can take anything that he reads and manifest it into reality.
Oh.
But much like Black Bolt, this power is uncontrollable, automatic, and
Oh,
always
horrifying.
on. If he reads the word fire, the area around him will burst into flames. If he reads the word death, somebody around him will immediately perish. If he reads the word castle, a castle will just manifest in his vicinity with all natural things therein.
Kind of horrifying.
The one limitation on his powers is that he can do this 3 times a day, and each consecutive use will be weaker than the previous one. So to recap all this, because I know it's kind of a lot to process, whatever 3 words Reader reads first in a given day will be translated.
So he's not allowed to read. Basically, he can't. Like, it's not speaking the word out loud in Rand. He has
to
to
automatic,
just read.
sort of magical effects. And again, he has no control over this. This power made Reader so wildly dangerous that he was blinded by members of his tribe almost immediately after Terrigenesis. This is awful, but he simply could not be allowed to read anything because who knows what could happen. This, however, led to one of the 2 reasons that the character is so incredibly cool. Blind people can still read, they just read
in
through
Braille.
The way Reader uses his powers as an adult is by carrying cards around with him that have specific words written on them in Braille that he can pull out and then just swipe his fingers over at any time he needs
That's
them.
actually a really cool thing for a blind superhero. Wow, okay, cool.
He has a card that says freeze, which is a time stop. He has a card that just says away, which he can use as a teleport. He has a card that says see, which allows him to see through the eyes of his seeing eye dog, Fori, directly.
He has a seeing eye dog,
For the
that's
Dungeons
great.
and Dragons fans watching, which, knowing my audience, is probably quite a bit of you,
Maybe.
His power seems a lot like a unique and interesting twist on spell slots, and it gets even cooler when you see how the comic treats the concept of language in relation to it. After all, the meaning of a word is not a universal constant.
That is
true. They only work, written or spoken, because everybody who understands the language has generally agreed more or less on what the meaning is for that specific set of symbols. And this can be weaponized when it comes to Reader. There's a fantastic scene with Reader, Maximus, and a bunch of other Inhumans where they need a very specific thing to happen, that being access to the astral plane for their entire group. This, in theory, is within Reader's capabilities, but his powers are word-based, not phrase-based, so he can't take mass astral projection as one effect that he can then trigger. And then Maximus, insane but genius man that he is, gets an idea. He quickly grabs a braille tile, inscribes the word Floob, F-L-O-O-B, onto it, and then talks to the entire group, saying that, hey, Floob now means mass astral projection. And we, as a group, are all agreeing on what the definition of Floob is. Reader is part of this, he has agreed on it as well, and therefore, when Reader's power activates, it will filter through his own mind and his own understanding of language, and the spell will work. He scans the tile Floob, and it now, in his brain, means mass astral projection.
That's crazy!
And that's exactly what happens. This is incredibly cool. I have talked about this scene to linguists before, and they always get the most excited look on their face at hearing about this. Because, I mean, this is genius. This is such a clever application of his wildly specific power. It's written by Al Ewing, by the way, because of course it is. Of course it is.
I will say, as much as you've shown me from Al Ewing, he is a very interesting man with a lot of cool ideas.
Fortunately, though, exactly like I said for Thane, a Reader has not appeared since the Inhumans incident. He got a few arcs as one of the new members of the roster during that time, and then since their de-emphasis, he's just gotten nothing. I don't know if he's technically been killed off like all of the other ones, but I also don't think we've seen his body. So in comic book terms, and sometimes
who knows?
When we do see the body, that means he can be alive again.
I mean, how many times has Wolverine come back to life? Even with his, absorbed oxygen and someone cracks open the shell of adamantium around him and he goes around.
Story demands it. Who else is here on my list? There's Eldrak. Eldrak is a door.
What?
His Terrigenesis turned him into a gigantic stationary door, and people can walk through it, and then he can just teleport them wherever in the world they need to go. He's a door. There's not much else to say about him. Well, there is more to say about him, but we'll get to that later. Another standout
I feel bad for him. He's just a door.
character from this era, in a good way, is Kid Kaiju.
Yeah!
Kid Kaiju is like a 12-year-old boy, and he draws monsters. And when he draws monsters, he summons them to his location and can
Funny
use
enough,
them
Kid
to
Kaiju was apparently in a sort of anime Marvel series. Like, all of his monsters were there, too.
fight. Kid Kaiju's awesome, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to do more of a summary of him in this
Because
video.
you have
not
a
because
video
I
of him.
dislike him, but because he already has an
Yay!
entire dedicated video on this channel.
Which
So
I have also reacted to. I have a playlist of stuff I've watched from Sir Superhero.
if you want more of the good Inhumans after this one's done, you can just go and watch that. Of course, nowhere near all of the new humans from this era are good. There's a lot of them that are fine, but not really notable characters who were just around for this and then died out with no fanfare when the initiative was over. Some of them are just straight up stupid, though.
Any number of reasons, but one, they hit me.
Like Grid.
Grid?
Is, I think, my favorite example of Terrigenesis giving somebody dumb powers. Not even dumb in the fun way like Eldrac is. Grid's thing is that he can see and manipulate the electromagnetic spectrum. That part is fine. But the dumb part is that when he came out of his cocoon, he no longer had his hands, and instead his hands had been replaced by
glowy
these
rings.
things.
What the hell is
I'm
that?
not even really sure what these are supposed to be. They might just be a visual representation of him having like energy
What the
hands
hell
that would work
is
better
this?
in an animated
He looks
setting that they
goofy.
can move. But they're just like
And the guy at first appearance, he cuts off his hands and draw. And his shirt somehow goes over the remove parts, which is a minor thing. Nitpick, what?
like concentric rings. This is what he has instead of hands now, and that's his power.
What the
Marvel
hell?
didn't even have the guts to commit to making Grid an
They gave him
amputee
hands.
character and having arcs about him learning to live without hands. Because in his
They
like
just gave
second
robot
appearance,
hands.
he gets high-tech robot prosthetics, and that's what he has now. The concentric rings just kind of go around them. And that's Grid's whole thing. He was part of the new roster of Inhumans for all those books where it mattered, and then, of course, he was immediately shelved when the initiative was over.
Of
And
course.
speaking of weirdly specific Inhuman powers, though this time on a far better character, Moon Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Moon Girl is actually
I thought he was
an
gonna talk to her.
Inhuman. Originally, she never went through Terrigenesis.
It's
Her
still
whole
kind of weird that she still had her like major intelligence. That's what I thought were gonna be her power. But at the end, it's just, you know,
thing was
it's
just
a
that she
weird
was a kid,
little
and
power
she was a genius, and
that
she
they could
invented a
push
bunch
over
of
to
cool
the side and
gadgets
never
which
have
she
to deal
used
with.
to fight crime, and also she had a pet dinosaur, which is a lot of things rolled into one concept, but
really
Moon
is.
Girl is very fun, so it worked. Given that she was an Inhuman character, though, she would go through Terrigenesis a bit into her existence.
Yeah.
And the power that she came out the other side with was the ability to temporarily swap bodies with Devil Dinosaur, meaning
It
that she
feels
could stomp
very
around and go into
specific.
a more combat-focused form. This is awesome, but it also is really weird because
Yeah.
her power is not swapping minds in general, or swapping minds with animals, or even
It's-
swapping
yeah.
minds with dinosaurs.
Extremely
Her
specific.
Inhuman ability, which is apparently coded directly into her genetics, is that she can brain swap with
the
Devil Dinosaur
specifically. It feels weird.
Like I've said
right?
a couple times in this video, Inhuman powers can just be they can just be whatever. Marvel has historically tried to explain them away a bit more scientifically than with other characters, but in practice, suspension of disbelief. Terrigenesis is a way that people get superpowers. Who knows what happens?
I sure as hell
As for
don't.
Moon Girl specifically, though, she is one
Yeah,
of the
I heard about the
characters which
show.
has gained lasting power after the disaster of the Inhumans. She keeps getting comics
seems
on
like a fun
regular
character.
basis. For one, because she's independently
I
a
do
good
think it's funny
character,
for him to have
but
those little
probably
things on
also,
his
too,
back.
because her concept doesn't need to be related to the Inhumans.
It really
she can
doesn't.
just do her own thing, and the dinosaur swapping can just be a thing that she does.
Eh.
And with Moon Girl covered, that's really all the Inhumans that I wanted to hit towards the end of the video here. Just a
Okay.
few more scattered in right at the end as a way to prove that there were some gems in this era, even after I spent a good chunk of the video hating on the last decade for the group. So
Where do we go now?
Is this over 2-hour long video really going to end by me just saying, and now the Inhumans are gone? What a weird time that was. Bye, everybody.
I mean,
Well, it really was shockingly close to being that.
Let me
I
guess,
I
they
would've
got a new
phrased it
comic
in
or
a more
something.
interesting way. But if I had made this video just a couple of months earlier, it would have had a far more underwhelming ending. The Inhumans were gone for over 7 years, reduced to only minor cameos for the most major members and absolutely nothing for anyone else. Until August 20th of this year in a comic called Imperial. A quick courtesy for anyone watching this video shortly after I release
There's
it.
a bunch of
Imperial
Hulks.
is a very recent comic, and I'm going to be spoiling the entire thing. So if you would like to read the 4 issues of the series first, this is the only warning that I'm going to give you. Imperial was a big intergalactic
There's the
crossover
Kree,
involving
the
basically
Skrull.
everyone in the Marvel Universe that does space things. The Guardians of the Galaxy, the Nova Corps,
Who are the
Kree,
horse
the
people?
Skrulls, the Intergalactic Empire of Wakanda, and more. Even Planet Hulk stuff got looped back in for this.
Did Hulk just have a bunch of kids on Planet Hulk and just they live there now or something? I don't. And of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy are involved. But yeah.
All of these spacefaring civilizations were being thrown into conflict due to a series of killings targeting powerful members of the Galactic Council. This is what most of Imperial was. It was a space empire murder mystery. And in the third issue of the crossover, it is revealed that the cosmic forces orchestrating all of this behind the scenes are the Grandmaster and Maximus of the Inhumans.
I see.
This twist was a huge deal
And Black
given
Bolt's
just
there.
how long it had been since Maximus had mattered, especially because he was not acting alone. In Imperial,
With the
Maximus was
Grandmaster.
working with the royal family for once. And
What?
as the event progresses, the rest of them show up too. Black Bolt, Medusa, Karnak, Crystal,
What are they
Triton,
doing
Gorgon,
here?
even Lockjaw. All of the royals are back in the fold doing space crap. All of Imperial was a grand scheme to restore the Inhumans to relevance on the cosmic scale. Karnak even addresses this outright,
We Inhumans are tired of being swept from one position.
saying, "We Inhumans tire of being swept from one position to the next by the whims of a cosmic status quo." Which definitely feels like it was written
little
as
on
a
the
little bit of
nose.
a jab towards the real history of the characters. Fittingly, Imperial concludes with a new cosmic status quo for everybody. This was really the goal of the event. It was meant to revitalize the kind of space opera sphere that Marvel has. In current canon,
Rest in peace
all
and
of
long
these
live you.
empires are united under a galactic union, which is led by Star-Lord of all people. The Inhumans evidently are going to play some role in this going forward. Maximus has been exiled again. Black
Of course.
Bolt was absolutely just manipulating him for his own ends and kicks him to the curb once that job is done.
Sounds about right.
Which Maximus respects, being the awful man that he is.
Of course he
As
does.
for what
It's
this
weird
new
seeing
era
Black
of
Bolt
the Inhumans
smirk
is
like
going
that.
to look like, I couldn't tell you, not yet at least. Imperial issue 4 is a very recent book, coming out on October 9th, 2025, and no follow-ups to the Inhumans part have been released yet.
Wow.
I do think we can definitely
All right.
expect something, though. The ending of Imperial really reads like a big dramatic teaser setup, and the book was written by Jonathan Hickman, who is
I don't
famous
know
for
anything
being the
about
guy
him
that
either.
Marvel calls in to refresh parts of their world building that have gotten a little bit dated. They didn't call
Okay.
him in by coincidence. Him being involved means that things are working in the background. We're just going to have to wait on specifics until Marvel gives us an official follow-up announcement, but boy, did they set me up perfectly with the best time to make this video. Evidently, a nearly 8-year timeout was long enough that Marvel thought the Inhumans could be revitalized, and I'm quite excited for it. Imperial makes it almost comedically obvious that when the Inhumans return, they're not just going to be X-Men clones again. This entire
That's
event
really good.
makes it as obvious as possible that the Inhumans will be back to their status quo as space and cosmic characters, typically one of the most well-received iterations of the group by the fans. And with Jonathan Hickman at the wheel, well, he's one of the best world builders in the game, so the Inhumans are in good hands. It is also definitely worth calling attention to the fact that Imperial did not establish the Inhumans were necessarily going to be good guys going forward. The Royals do a lot of shady stuff in this event, all for the sake of establishing their new empire in the cosmos. this is another piece of the puzzle that's giving me a lot of hope for where the characters might be going. A recurring point in this video has been that the Inhumans have a lot of uncomfy concepts
they do.
baked into their world building at a foundational level.
They just usually don't bring
these are
it
not
up.
things that should be ignored. The Inhumans just don't work as well when they are represented as morally black and white.
Yeah.
Let the Inhuman royals be an elite ruling body over a civilization that is hyper-fixated on genetics. Not because that's a good thing that we'd all be rooting for, but because then we can see the characters deal with the consequences and ramifications of this philosophy, which is the kind of thing that makes a good sci-fi story.
Not wrong.
With that in mind, I think a redemption arc for the Inhumans is long overdue. Not redemption in a moral sense.
But in
Don't
story
just
writing.
sweep all of their problems under the rug again. I mean redemption in a narrative sense. Tell interesting stories with the Inhumans again. Who knows, if all goes well, maybe in a couple of years I can make a follow-up video called The Rise and Fall and Rise of the Inhumans,
maybe.
Marvel's former biggest failure. And as we reach the conclusion of this video, let's talk about that title briefly. I'm sure some of you, the proud, dedicated Inhumans fans, kind of bristled when you saw me call them Marvel's biggest failure. And yes, I will admit, on one hand, it was a title designed to get YouTube clicks. But on the other hand, I do think it's a valid description. Are there worse Marvel properties than the Inhumans? Yes, of course there are. And are there Marvel properties that have had less success over the years than the Inhumans have? Once again, absolutely. But the difference between all of those failed projects and the Inhumans is that during the 2010s especially, Marvel was really genuinely trying. This initiative was a company-wide effort spanning multiple books.
It was kind of crazy. It's kind of one of those things that proves that you can't really, no matter how hard you try, you can't really force people to like characters. People, obviously, Marvel still tries certain characters with that, but, you know. I've made my thoughts on those characters very relevant, so,
And events, bringing back old characters, introducing new characters, having video game tie-ins and movie tie-ins, or at least an attempt at a movie tie-in, and throughout all of that, throughout all of Marvel's corporate effort thrown into this as best they could, fans generally came out of this 5-year-long project
and
liking
didn't
the Inhumans
care
less than they did before.
Yeah.
That right there is why I think the title of Marvel's biggest failure is more than earned.
Yeah.
But ironically, I
we're
think
talking
that
about
what this
the
whole
specific
incident
event.
says about the comics community in general is actually really good.
And that is?
I am resisting the urge to go on a whole Brennan Lee Mulligan style monologue.
I don't know who that is.
Creativity is fundamentally ethically superior to the ideals of business, but I will keep
mean,
on
they
to the
technically
main topic.
are.
Inhumans failed because it was not driven by creativity. There were creative forces in here, obviously, and those are the parts that gave us the actual good elements of the initiative. But the core driving force was corporate greed and petty bitterness. Marvel Corporate was mad and tried to optimize their releases in favor of money and business over storytelling, and the fans resoundingly rejected the whole thing. To put it another way, Ike Perlmutter tried to butt his way into things, causing the one above all to descend from the heavens,
and
smack him
smack
upside
him
the head, and say,
smite
no,
him.
don't do that. Which is kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's address Perlmutter one final time.
Okay.
What happened to him?
Didn't he get ousted?
He would remain at Marvel for a bit after the whole Inhumans debacle, but unsurprisingly, it doesn't seem like this was great for his business reputation, and you don't find nearly as many stories of him messing with things post 2018 and 2019.
True.
He definitely did not get better, though, and
As far
his
as I
many
know.
sins would eventually catch
I
up
haven't
with
heard
him,
of it.
as Perlmutter was unceremoniously fired from his position at Marvel in 2023 and no
I
longer
thought he
has
was.
any power over any branch of the company. Far too late for my liking, but whatever, I will take it. I wish the man as much happiness in his retirement as he brought to the rest of the world.
Oh,
Now,
I see what you mean there.
in 2025, Perlmutter is gone, and the Inhumans yet remain. I'm not sure exactly where they're going to be
in a
going
lesser
from
extent,
here,
but they
I
still
know
remain.
that whatever challenges they may face in the future, they've already outlasted villains who are far worse.
Perlmutter
Thank you all
specifically.
so much.
I will say
for
the name
watching
Perlmutter
what
is
to
such
date,
a
at
funny
least,
name.
the longest video that I have ever made. I promised a lot of real-world drama, and I think I was able to deliver. The Tale of the Inhumans is a pretty interesting story. Maybe not in in the way that Marvel wanted it to be, but interesting nonetheless.
Yeah,
As for
definitely
announcements,
so.
I do have a special one today, or at least a special version of one. I have a Patreon. If you go and check that out, you can find early and ad-free access to all of my videos, as well as a new exclusive video every month. This month, I did something a little bit different that I have done once before, which is make the exclusive Patreon video a kind of like a bonus features extra segment for this feature-length one. And in this case, it's maybe the dumbest Patreon video I've ever done. So if you care to
The Super Sir Who?
throw me
You
$5
said,
for my troubles,
the
you can go and
doorman.
watch the Sir Superhero Eldrac Special, which is an entire dedicated video about every single appearance of Eldrac the Door. Remember the Inhuman who got turned into a big door?
I feel
I
bad
talk
for
about
him.
all of his appearances, and one of them is live action.
What?
You also get access to my entire backlog of exclusives. There's like 5 hours and counting of content on there. My username on Patreon is the exact same as it is here. There's also a link on my channel page and in the description of this video. It's very easy to find, and double thank you to everyone who already supports me over there. It really helps me in continuing to make these videos for you all.
Okay.
Also, as always, shout out to Ruben Perez,
Shout out the artist.
artist I work with for these videos. He drew the poses of the character that you've been watching talk at you for the last 2 hours, some of which were new for this video, so I hope you guys appreciated those. And
this
now,
video has been a
I
lot
can breathe
longer than I
easy
planned for
because
it to
the
be.
very long, very detailed video that I have been promising for months is finally complete. Now I sit back and wait for the follow-up to Imperial to change everything about the Inhumans once again. Oh well, it's just the nature of the medium. I'll get used to it.
Yeah, the Inhumans have gone through a lot, haven't they? The Terrigen Wave. There is even a Spider, I think, Ghost Spider or Spider-Gwen show that had the Terrigen Mist, but Terrigen Wave at the time. You know, instead of having, like, Peter Parker because they didn't know it at the time. And also had Kamala Khan and Squirrel Girl for some reason. I've given my thoughts on the Kamala Khan before in another video where she's more involved in. But, yeah. Overall, the Inhumans are kind of just there for me. I don't have a strong opinion about them. I think Reader's cool. I like him. But they don't have as much staying power for someone like me. You know what I mean? Like, like them, hate them. I'm definitely glad I wasn't there reading them tear apart the X-Men for a bit. God, I would have been so frustrated if I read that at the time. But anyway, if you guys want more, like, comment, and subscribe. It would definitely help me out. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye, and take care of yourselves. I also will say this, I do have a Patreon if you guys want to help me out with that. And we have other stuff coming out for you guys, including a new comic dub when I finally get that done. But yeah, this video I put out is 3 hours long. I'm not sure if this is my longest reaction ever. It probably is. But I feel like I put in the effort to at least make it transformative content, don't you guys? But yeah. I also have to ask an important question before I end things off, but it's getting very hot in here, so I kind of slowed things down. What do you guys think of the Inhumans? Do you like them? Do you hate what they did with the X-Men vs. Inhumans? Do you, what's your favorite Inhuman, if you do like them? Tell me down below. I always love to hear from you guys. Later, guys, and take care of yourselves as always. Yeah!